Chapter 48-79. After a while, Xian Xiaozi retracted his divine sense with some resentment. He stretched out his hands to take a closer look and thought to himself, what kind of formation is this space? Or is this tree some kind of spiritual treasure? My Chu Pu Immortal Alliance and Qiu Yi Immortal Alliance are clearly in the Night Wind Valley, while the other immortal alliances of the Tao Alliance are in other places. Yet, through this tree, I feel like they're right in front of me. Also, is I here in my physical body, my primordial spirit, or even a projection of my primordial spirit? As he thought about it, Xian Xiaozi wanted to activate his magic power. However, this thought disappeared in a flash because he had already tested it before. Be it his physical body, his nascent soul, or his storage ring, everything that could be used on the Yi Lin continent could be used in this space. Xian Xiaozi almost believed that if the tribulation-passing seniors of the Tao Alliance were willing, cultivators from any two places on the Yi Lin continent could meet and even fight to the death in this space, no matter how far apart they were. Since they had arrived at the Alliance conference, Wen Jiawen of the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance did not dare to speak loudly. He sat cross-legged in the middle of a small tree trunk and looked up at the tribulation-passing cultivators. No one knew what he was thinking. Half a meal's worth of time had passed. Cough cough. A series of coughs sounded from the top of the tree. The dozens of tribulation-passing cultivators who had been whispering to each other stopped and looked at the center of the tree. There was no dazzling light, nor was there any earth-shattering tremors. A short old man had appeared just like that. However, when they saw this old man, the dozens of tribulation-passing cultivators were all moved. They all stood up and bowed respectfully, "Greetings, Alliance leader." As everyone's strength increased, a tall middle-aged cultivator appeared behind the old man. Although this middle-aged cultivator's divine aura was restrained and his every move was filled with the power of the laws, he still stood beside the old man and did not dare to take a step forward. Tao Alliance leader. This is old man Gu Qiong. The tribulation-passing cultivators did not speak loudly, but Xian Xiaozi heard them clearly. He was also stunned. Ever since he entered the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance as the sect leader of the fallen immortal sect, he had heard of the Tao Alliance leader, old man Gu Qiong's name. However, he had never seen him before. He had even asked Wen Jie, but even Wen Jie had never seen him before. However, he had heard from Wen Jie that although old man Gu Qiong was the Tao Alliance's alliance master, he never interfered in the Tao Alliance's affairs. He didn't even participate in the alliance meetings. Instead, he left everything in the Tao Alliance to the Vice Alliance Master, Reverend Ji Yen. He was the middle-aged cultivator next to old man Gu Qiong. Ji greetings, Lord Alliance Master. In an instant, countless excited voices rang out from all corners of the Alliance conference. Xian Xiaozi came back to his senses and climbed up from the leaf as well. He bowed respectfully. All of you, get up. Old man Gu Qiong's voice was filled with the vicissitudes of life, as if he had seen through everything. As he waved his hand, Xian Xiaozi felt a gentle force emerge from beneath him. This force did not carry any dust or dharma power. It seemed to be the pure power of space. Xian Xiaozi was shocked. Because he clearly knew that the tree wasn't connected at all. How could old man Gu Qiong let everyone feel his strength? What kind of divine ability was this? Thank you, Alliance Master. Xian Xiaozi's shock seemed to be shared by the tens of thousands of cultivators. When they replied in unison, their voices were filled with shocking momentum. Old man Gu Qiong waved his hand amiably when he saw that everyone had risen. He gestured for everyone to sit down before he looked around. Xian Xiaozi did not know what was going on, but he felt that old man Gu Qiong's gaze was very similar to his master's. It was filled with love and concern. Xian Xiaozi even felt that old man Gu Qiong's gaze lingered on him for a moment. Then, old man Gu Qiong said, "I'm ashamed to say this. Although I'm the alliance master of the Tao Alliance, I haven't been to the Alliance conference many times. I remember that the last time was during the invasion of the demon realm. Yes, Lord Alliance Master is right. Perfected Ji Yen smiled and said, if Lord Alliance Master hadn't killed the Blood Shadow Demon Sovereign back then, the Yilan continent would have fallen into the hands of the demon race. No, no. Old man Gu Qiong waved his hand and said, my strength is insignificant. The key is the cultivators of the Immortal Alliance who set up the ambush. They are the real heroes. The dozens of tribulation-passing cultivators next to him laughed and said, Alliance Master, you're too modest. They were just bait. Without Alliance Master's help, how could we be a match for the Blood Shadow Demon Sovereign who was almost indestructible? Huh, a real man doesn't boast about his past achievements. I won't be able to lead the Yilan continent for long. If nothing unexpected happens, this will be the last time I attend the Alliance conference. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, I hope I can do something for the Tao Alliance. Oh. A middle-stage tribulation-passing cultivator next to him was startled. He asked in a low voice, Lord Alliance Master, is the demon race really invading again? Ji Yen, you tell him. Old man Gu Qiong smiled and turned to look at Perfected Ji Yen. Okay. Please take a seat, Lord Alliance Master. Perfected Ji Yen waved his hand, and a rattan chair made of leaves appeared beside Old man Gu Qiong. Old man Gu Qiong looked around and sat down. Just like Old man Gu Qiong, Perfected Ji Yen looked around and glanced at everyone in the Alliance conference. However, his gaze was as sharp as a sword, causing Xian Xiaozi's heart to tremble. There are still 11 cultivators who haven't arrived yet, including the Alliance Master of the Immortal Alliance, Daoist Ji Yen said coldly. I really didn't expect this. Could it be that the Tao Alliance's rules have become mere decorations today? From now on, these 11 people are expelled from the Tao Alliance. They can't re-enter the Tao Alliance unless they make a great contribution. The sects they belong to. Ahem, Ji Yen. Old man Gu Qiong smiled and said, an individual's mistake is an individual's. There's no need to involve their sects. Yes, Lord Alliance Master. Perfected Ji Yen replied. He looked at the crowd and said, you don't have to feel wronged for them. If it were under normal circumstances, I wouldn't care if they were late. But today, the Tao Alliance's Earth-level Alliance token was activated. How could they not care? Aside from Old Man Gu Qiong, the Tao Alliance also invited Yu Hongzi, Mo Yun, the Yi family's patriarch, and other late-stage tribulation-passing cultivators to discuss this matter. Even the seniors came on time, so how could they not come? Yes, Alliance Master. More than 10 Alliance Masters of the Immortal Alliance replied from all over the Alliance conference. Perfected Ji Yen lectured a few more times before he changed the topic and said, today, I invited all of you here not only to discuss a few things with you, but also to inform all the disciples of the Tao Alliance about what we're going to discuss. We'll let them know what kind of danger we're in and what we should do, to get out of this hopeless situation. Yes, Vice Alliance Master, we'll listen to your orders. The tribulation-passing cultivators sitting high on the treetops said in unison. Daoist Ji Yen nodded slightly and said, today, our Tao Alliance will discuss a few things. The first is the change in the world's spiritual energy. Where should the cultivators of our Tao Alliance go on their cultivation path? As soon as Perfected Ji Yen spoke, the cultivators of the Tao Alliance who were sitting on the treetops and branches in the Alliance conference couldn't help but murmur among themselves. The scene instantly became chaotic. However, Perfected Ji Yen didn't get angry. Instead, he quietly listened and watched. After the time it takes to finish a cup of tea, he finally spoke up. I know that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth has changed for hundreds of years, but the Tao Alliance has never publicly acknowledged it, nor has it ever held an Alliance conference. Haha, this is the first Alliance conference to be held after the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Thus, the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will be the main topic of discussion. Of course, although the Tao Alliance hasn't said anything about the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the disciples of the Tao Alliance have already started investigating this matter. The efforts of the Tao Alliance are far beyond what you can imagine. Perfected Ji Yen paused for a moment before continuing. The disciples of the Tao Alliance have not only explored the Yilin continent of the Tao Alliance to see if there are spatial tiers, but they have also organized Qi refinement, foundation establishment, and golden core cultivators to test the effects of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on cultivation. They have also studied how to cultivate under the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, how to refine tools, how to refine pills, how to cultivate spirit herbs, and so on. However, 500 to 600 years is truly a short period of time, and there hasn't been a clear conclusion yet. In my opinion, this investigation won't have a clear result for at least 1,000 or 10,000 years. Perfected Ji Yan's words were like a huge rock thrown into a deep pool, immediately creating waves. Not to mention the people under the treetops, even the tribulation-passing seniors on the treetops couldn't help but speak up. After all, the Tao Alliance's strength was extraordinary. What they did was far beyond that of ordinary sections. If Perfected Ji Yen said so, then the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would probably affect the development of the Tao Alliance. Moreover, Perfected Ji Yen had just revealed the word impasse, so how could they not know that the situation had reached a critical point? Sure enough, Perfected Ji Yen waited for a while before he raised his hand again, signaling everyone to stop. He looked around and saw the dozens of tribulation-passing cultivators on the left and said, "As you've all discussed, it's not wrong for me to use the term impasse to describe the current Tao Alliance. I don't want to say more. Today, I just want to ask all of you, fellow Taoists, have you recently sensed the gate of the immortal realm?" The dozens of tribulation-passing cultivators fell silent upon hearing Perfected Ji Yan's words. They looked at each other, and no one was willing to speak first. Since ancient times, the cultivators of the Tao Alliance who had cultivated to the peak of Mahayana realm could see the secrets of the heavenly Tao and the crudest outline of it. The outline of the heavenly Tao was called the Gate of the Heavenly Tao by the cultivators of the Tao Alliance. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it as thanks for all your support. Chapter 4880. Once the heavenly Tao gate became clear, the heavenly tribulation would descend from the heavenly Tao gate. It was like the hand of the heavenly Tao cleansing the body of a Mahayana cultivator and sorting out the flaws in their cultivation. If a Mahayana cultivator was lucky enough to pass the heavenly tribulation and reach the tribulation passing stage, the spiritual energy in their body would gradually transform into immortal spiritual energy. As the amount of immortal spiritual energy increased, not only would the repulsive force of the Yilin continent become stronger, but the aura of the immortal realm would also become clearer. At that time, the tribulation passing cultivator would be able to sense the guiding force of the immortal realm. At the later stages of the tribulation passing stage, the guiding force would become stronger and stronger. The tribulation passing cultivator would first sense the location, then form an outline, and finally form a gate before ascending. This was why the Yilin continent called it the Immortal Realm Gate. The Heavenly Tao Gate was actually born out of the Immortal Realm Gate. These two gates were the most crucial points of cultivation for the Tao Alliance. It was similar to Xiao Hua's scattered nascent soul cultivation. The appearance of the Immortal Realm Gate meant that a tribulation-passing cultivator could ascend at any time. However, ascension wasn't smooth sailing. They had to go through another heavenly tribulation. This heavenly tribulation was weaker than the Mahayana realm and its main purpose was to change the laws of heaven and earth. However, this heavenly tribulation had a huge effect. It would completely change the cultivator's body and nascent soul. It was like breaking through and then rebuilding. At this stage, the tribulation-passing cultivator was the most powerful but also the weakest. Even an early tribulation passing cultivator could kill a late tribulation passing cultivator if they broke through their defenses. Therefore, the Yilan continent's tribulation passing cultivators usually kept the timing of sensing the immortal realm gate and the location of their tribulation a secret. Now that Taoist Ji Yen was asking about this in front of so many cultivators, it was definitely a huge taboo. Seeing that everyone was silent, old man Gu Qiong smiled. Ji Yan's question is rather abrupt, but don't blame him. Although everyone's sensing of the immortal realm gate is a secret, if no one says anything at this time, no one will know how dangerous the Tao Alliance's situation is. How about this old man will speak first. That's fine. Alliance leader, you can speak first. Taoist Ji Yen smiled. Old man Gu Qiong stood up and said, to tell you the truth, I've already sensed the exact location of the celestial gate 1,000 years ago, and I've already made preparations to ascend. However, about 600 years ago, the outline of the celestial world gate suddenly became blurry, and even started to become ethereal. This old man thought that this old man's realm had dropped, so I hurriedly went into seclusion. After checking my realm to no avail, this old man discovered that it was the influence of a change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. At this moment, this old man suddenly heard news from the Tao Alliance that a cultivator from the Tsupu Immortal Alliance, who had the highest chance of breaking through to the Tribulation Transcendence stage, had suddenly disappeared during the Tribulation Transcendence stage. This old man's heart thumped, and he had a bad feeling. Xian Xiaozi's heart thumped wildly when he heard this. He did not expect that a late-stage tribulation transcendence stage cultivator like old man Gu Qiong would know about Huang Qiong from the fallen immortal sect. Xian Xiaozi's heart trembled, and he was about to speak when old man Gu Qiong continued, then, as I expected, in the past 600 years, no more cultivators at the peak of the Mahayana stage in the Tao Alliance were able to safely ascend to the Tribulation Transcendence stage. According to the Tao Alliance's records, over 1,000 Mahayana stage cultivators have perished during the Tribulation Transcendence stage. Almost every immortal alliance has at least 10 of them. Hiss. Xian Xiaozi was stunned when he heard this. The joy of obtaining Huang Qiong's spiritual master's remains and belongings after he failed the Tribulation Transcendence stage had completely vanished. Even the urge to speak had disappeared. Of course, the chances of a Mahayana stage cultivator surviving the Tribulation Transcendence stage are extremely low, so perhaps the death of 1,000 Mahayana stage cultivators doesn't mean anything. Old man Gu Qiong continued, however, in this old man's senses, the celestial gate is becoming more and more blurry, and it's even to the point where it can only tell me its location. This is definitely not normal, and it's definitely something that has never happened before in the history of the Tao Alliance. If this is the case for this old man, I'm sure, all of you would be in the same situation, right? That's right. Ji Yen continued, this old man's senses are similar to Senior Gu Qiong's. However, I only sensed the location of the celestial gate 800 years ago, and before I could even sense the outline of the celestial gate, its location was gradually becoming more and more blurry. Now, to be honest, I can't even sense the location of the celestial gate. Sigh. After Ji Yen finished speaking, an old man in linen clothes stood up and said, my situation is between fellow Taoist Gu Qiong and fellow Taoist Ji Yen. I always thought that there was a mistake in my cultivation, and I later thought that it might be due to the changes in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, but I didn't expect the situation to be so dire. If we can't sense the celestial gate, how can we ascend? Wouldn't we be like those cultivators who didn't comprehend the tribulation transcendence stage and die in vain? The Yi family ancestor is right. Then, a graceful woman stood up and said, I've always been puzzled and wanted to ask all of you, but I didn't dare to. Now that I've seen it, the others might be better, but us late-stage tribulation transcendence stage cultivators, are in imminent danger. Then, more than 10 tribulation transcendence stage cultivators all spoke. None of them could sense the celestial gate. Although the other tribulation transcendent stage cultivators didn't speak, their expressions were gloomy. Clearly, the others were in the same situation as them. The celestial gate is blocked. Where does our path of cultivation lead to? Taoist Ji Yen enunciated each word clearly. The Yi family ancestor thought for a moment and said, I once thought that the celestial gate must still be there. However, due to the changes in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the celestial gate is too far away from us, and we can't sense it with our current cultivation. Perhaps, if we cultivate for another few thousand years, we'll be able to sense the celestial gate again. The Yi family ancestor is right. Ji Yen nodded. However, there are three problems with this idea. First, our Tao Alliance's cultivation methods can only be cultivated up to late-stage tribulation transcendent stage. There aren't any more cultivation methods for us to cultivate. Second, the Yilan continent's laws of heaven and earth don't allow late-stage tribulation transcendent stage cultivators to ascend once they reach the peak. Third, and this is what we'll discuss in a moment. Due to the changes in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, our lifespans have already begun to decrease. We don't have any extra time to cultivate more cultivation methods. Actually, it's very simple to solve these problems. The female cultivator spoke again. First, cultivation methods are created by humans. The changes in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth created a new world. We just have to create a cultivation method that surpasses late-stage tribulation transcendent stage. Second, if we leave the Yilan continent and head to another world where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth hasn't changed, wouldn't we still be able to ascend? The Yi family ancestor sneered and looked at the female cultivator. Fairy Mo Yun's words are too simple. Who knows what realm late-stage tribulation transcendent stage is and how to cultivate? Before you can create a cultivation method, your lifespan will be up. Everything will turn into flowing water. I think Fairy Mo Yun's second point does make some sense. Another cultivator wearing a Taoist crown stood up and said, I remember that there's a lost place in the east of the Wumeng mountain range. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth there might not have changed. Why don't we just go there? Fu Bo Sanren, don't forget. The Yi family ancestor glanced at the cultivator and said, this is the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that has changed in the Yilan continent. Although the lost place is separated from the Yilan continent by the Wumeng mountain range, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth there is no difference between the lost place and the Yilan continent. How can there not be any changes in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth there? Besides, do you have the confidence to pass through the Wumeng mountain range? Instead of thinking about the lost place, why don't you consider the 10,000 demon realm? Hearing this, old man Gu Qiong also said, this old man has also thought about the 10,000 demon realm. However, according to the records of the Tao Alliance, the 10,000 demon realm and the Yilan continent do not have a fixed spatial passage. Moreover, the 10,000 demon realm is full of demon clans. Each of them is several times more ferocious than our human clan. It is extremely difficult for us to survive in the 10,000 demon realm. Oh, also, the astral energy in the 10,000 demon realm is especially strong. It greatly suppresses the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that we humans can absorb into our bodies. We humans cannot cultivate in the 10,000 demon realm. Ji Yen Jinren nodded and said, Lord Alliance Leader is right. In I's eyes, the 10,000 demon realm is the same as the demon realm. We humans are food for both the demon clan and the demon clan. If we go to the 10,000 demon realm, we will end up being eaten by the demon clan. Then, are there any other realms that we can go to? Fu Bo Sanren hesitated and asked. The Yi family ancestor looked at Fu Bo Sanren with disdain and said, according to the records of the Yi family, there seems to be the Blue Rain realm and the Four Seasons sky nearby. However, this is only a record. It doesn't say where the spatial passages are. What is the situation of these two realms? Very good. Ji Yen Jinren clapped his hands and said, Yi family ancestor, the Tao Alliance invited you here for this matter. Our Tao Alliance only has records of the Blue Rain Realm and not the Four Seasons sky. There are also no records of spatial passages. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and said, in that case, the first topic has come to a conclusion. Creating a cultivation method is the long-term plan, and finding spatial passages to other realms is the temporary plan. After the Alliance Conference, send out people to find spatial passages. As soon as old man Gu Qiong finished speaking, Ji Yan Jinren immediately said, Immortal Alliance leader, sect masters. Yes. All the cultivators at the Alliance Conference did not dare to be negligent. They all stood up and bowed. You all understand the reason for this matter. Ji Yan Jinren said word by word, this matter concerns our present, your future, and even the future cultivation of our Tao Alliance disciples. It cannot be delayed. Once the Alliance Conference is over, I will once again issue a Heavenly Alliance medallion, ordering all the sects and clans of the 81 immortal alliances of the Tao Alliance to gather all of their forces and search the skies and the earth of the Yi-Lin continent, where the Tao Alliance is located, for any spatial rifts. We must find them. If anyone dares to delay, as a common saying in the mortal world, will be executed without mercy. Hearing Reverend Ji Yan's stern words, everyone knew that if there was any delay, Reverend Ji Yan would definitely take their lives. Therefore, no one dared to relax and hurriedly replied in unison, yes, we know. We won't dare to be negligent. Okay. Ji Yan Jinren waved his hand in satisfaction and said, take a seat. Let's discuss the second topic. After everyone sat down cross-legged, Ji Yan Jinren said, the second topic, as I said earlier, is the loss of lifespan for cultivators above the spirit-severing stage, Ji Yan. Old man Gu Qiong interrupted, as far as I know, nascent soul cultivators can also sense the loss of lifespan. Hiss. Ji Yan Jinren sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, it starts at nascent soul cultivators. Ji Yan Jinren looked at the nearest Immortal Alliance master and asked, Daoist Swiftpeng, is there any sign of this in your Immortal Alliance? The cultivator named Daoist Swiftpeng hurriedly stood up. He was a tall body integration cultivator and he replied, Vice Alliance Master, there was no sign of this before. It seems that 5 years ago, a few late-stage nascent soul disciples told me, okay, I understand. Ji Yan Jinren nodded and gestured for Daoist Swiftpeng to sit down. He then looked at everyone with a worried expression and said, previously, I thought that mentioning this during the Alliance Conference would cause panic among the Tao Alliance disciples. But now, it seems that even nascent soul cultivators' lifespan will be shortened. There is no need for us to hide it. Vice Alliance Master, the source of the loss of lifespan is naturally the change in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. The question now is. Fairy Mo Yun asked softly, why is our lifespan decreasing? If I don't use my magic power, there won't be any obvious changes to my lifespan. But if I use my magic power, even my flying technique will have slight changes. Also, the loss of lifespan is closely related to the power of the spell. Ji Yan Jinren smiled bitterly and said, Fairy Mo Yun has already told me the answer to this question. Why do you still need me to answer you? Old man Gu Qiong smiled and said, I've thought about it carefully. Everyone, think about it. Why do we have such a long lifespan? Isn't it because we cultivate? Then, old man Gu Qiong explained the relationship between lifespan and magic power. He even explained the difference between the physical bodies of demon beasts and humans, as well as the relationship between the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It was basically similar to what Xiaohua and Noa Yeqing had said that day. But in the end, he said, unfortunately, by now, I already know the relationship between the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and the physical body, but I still haven't found an effective method. After all, there are body cultivators in the Tao Alliance, and their realms are extremely high. But they can also sense the loss of lifespan. It's just that the loss of lifespan is slower than that of ordinary cultivators. The Yi family patriarch nodded and said, according to what Alliance Master said, there must be some unknown factor that affects lifespan. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. Chapter 4881. That's right. Old man Gu Qiong replied, man is the leader of all living things and is favored by heaven. The human body is the most suitable form for cultivation in the world, so the human body is the most mysterious thing in the world. What we know is only 1 out of 10,000. The mutated heaven and earth spirit qi must have affected some parts of our bodies. Fairy Mo Yun smiled bitterly. Alliance Master, what you said, is no different from not saying anything. Even you don't know the secret, so how can we know it? How can the other cultivators in the Tao Alliance know it? What's the use of putting this second topic on the agenda? Fairy, you're wrong. Taoist Ji Yen smiled. Our Tao Alliance has a long history, and our spiritual spells are broad and profound. Our Tao Alliance cultivates the nascent soul, while the Heaven Alliance cultivates the so-called essence soul. Only some sects near the Wumen mountain range cultivate the nascent soul. It's said that there are some cultivation techniques for the Golden Core 9 transformation in the Diamond Mountain range. Even though I'm a cultivator in the late stage of the tribulation passing stage, I feel that what I know is just a drop in the ocean. Who dares to say that they know everything in the Yilin continent? The reason why I brought this matter out for discussion is to gather the wisdom of the masses. I want to see which sect, which aristocratic family, or which rogue cultivator has a solution. Actually, let's not talk about a solution. Even an idea, is precious. After Taoist Ji Yen finished speaking, Fairy Mo Yun shook her head with a sigh and sat down. Everyone. Ji Yen Spiritual Master said again, you all heard what I said just now. If you have any ideas, or if you've encountered a different situation, feel free to share your thoughts. Unfortunately, for the time it took to finish a meal, the entire Alliance conference was silent. No one spoke a word. Taoist Ji Yen frowned and said, could it be that, all of you have a lifespan? Pill cultivators. Demon cultivators. Equipment cultivators. Body cultivators. Demonic cultivators. Still, no one answered. Obviously, no matter what kind of cultivation method they used, they had a lifespan problem. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, actually, you don't have to stick to any technique. As long as you have some ideas, even if they are unimaginable, they might be of some use. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was not here. Nuo Yeqing was not here. Lu Qingyu and Yu Hua were also not here. No one in the Man Meng Hui could say anything special. Alas, all right. Ji Yen looked at old man Gu Qiong and said with a wry smile, if that's the case, I'll issue an order after the Alliance meeting to ask the Tao Alliance for ways to stop the loss of lifespan. Anyone who can come up with useful suggestions will be rewarded handsomely, actually. Elder Yi smiled, if we can find a spatial passage to another realm, won't everything be solved? The realm passage. Old man Gu Qiong shook his head slightly. It's just a hope. It's realistic for us, but it's too far away for other cultivators. Ahem, Lord Alliance Leader. At this moment, on a tree branch in the distance, a short cultivator who looked like a dwarf coughed and said hesitantly, Junior has a suggestion. Oh, which immortal alliance are you from? Please tell me. Ji Yen Spiritual Master raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. I'm Yelu Qing, the sect leader of Lianyan Mountain in the Lofty Creek Immortal Alliance. The cultivator said respectfully, I think that since the Taoist cultivators who cultivate the nascent soul will lose their lifespan, what about the cultivators who cultivate the nascent soul in the Heaven Alliance? Will they be different? I thought. Ji Yen Spiritual Master's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to scold the cultivator, old man Gu Qiong hurriedly said with a smile, that's right, that's right. Yelu Qing, you have a great idea. I didn't think of going to the Heaven Alliance to find out more about the cultivators who cultivate the nascent soul. Ji Yan, after the Alliance meeting, you must send people to the Heaven Alliance immediately. Yes, Alliance leader. Ji Yan spiritual master replied with a smile, although there aren't many cultivators who cultivate the nascent soul in the Heaven Alliance, they're still part of the Taoist sect. Perhaps we can learn something from them. As Gu Qiong spoke, a palm-sized golden object appeared in his hand. He looked at Yelu Qing and said, Yelu Qing, your suggestion will be useful to the Tao Alliance. This is a spiritual weapon that I obtained a long time ago. I've never refined it, so I don't know how to use it. After the Alliance meeting, I'll ask the Tao Alliance to send it to you as a reward for your suggestion. Gu Qiong handed the spiritual weapon to Ji Yan, spiritual master. Buzz. The entire Alliance meeting was in an uproar. This was a spiritual weapon. Although there were many cultivators in the Tao Alliance and the Yi-Lin continent was huge, how many cultivators owned a spiritual weapon? Lord Alliance leader, I have an idea. Soon, a cultivator jumped out and said, I think so too. Before the cultivator could finish speaking, another cultivator chimed in. In just a moment, more than 10 cultivators spoke at the same time. It was obvious that Gu Qiong's generous offer had worked. Damn it, he won't act until he sees an incentive. Ji Yan spiritual master cursed inwardly, but he still put on a smile and said, Don't worry, everyone. Write down your ideas in jade slips and give them to your alliance leaders. After the alliance meeting, ask them to send it to Senior Gu Qiong for review. If he thinks it's useful, the Tao Alliance will reward you handsomely. The few cultivators who had just stood up opened their mouths and wanted to say something, but when they saw Ji Yan's face, they swallowed their words. Although the rewards might not be as good as the rewards now, with old man Gu Qiong in charge, they believed that things would be fair, so they sat down with peace of mind. A few impatient cultivators had already taken out jade slips to record their ideas. After everyone quieted down, Ji Yan spiritual master spoke again. Speaking of the primordial spirit cultivation method, the third topic I want to talk about is related to the Heaven Alliance. According to the Jingxian Alliance, Chongxi Immortal Alliance, and Lu Hong Immortal Alliance, which are closest to the Heaven Alliance, the Heaven Alliance has sent many cultivators to infiltrate our Tao Alliance in the past 10 years. It seems that they are up to something. Moreover, 5 years ago, a very strange thing happened in the Burning Field Immortal Alliance. Tens of thousands of people from the famous Peng family in the Jianghe country disappeared overnight. Alliance leader Li Bo of the Burning Field Immortal Alliance personally went to investigate, but he didn't find any trace of them. When the Tao Alliance sent more than 10 people there, they found an extremely secretive and huge teleportation array under the Peng family's ancestral temple. Then, after careful investigation, even this old man was shocked. The Pang clan actually came from ancient times. The Pang clan has a magical formation passed down from their ancestors. Why don't you guys take a guess as to what that magical formation is? Everyone was silent. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, or reward it. Chapter 4882. Without waiting for them to speak, Ji Yan roared, Heart-cleansing winnowing basket array. Heart-cleansing winnowing basket array. It's a supreme array recorded in our Tao sect's ancient records, used to defend against extraterrestrial demons. This array has been hidden in our Tao Alliance for so many years, but no one knows about it. Now that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is changing, we need the help of this ancient array. However, the Heaven Alliance stole the heart-cleansing winnowing basket array from the Peng family at this critical moment. This is nothing. Taoist Ji Yan seemed to be laughing out of anger as he said, Ha ha ha, do you know what angered me the most? Everyone remained silent. What angers me the most is, my favorite disciple, perfected Shiyu, whom you're all familiar with. He was actually sent by the Heaven Alliance. Ji Yan Jinren's breathing quickened as he exclaimed, he was in front of me for so many years. Not only did I not discover him, I even taught him the inheritance of my Chongshi sect. I really can't imagine what kind of promise the Heaven Alliance gave him. This promise is nothing compared to the thousands of years of nurturing and teaching in the Tao Alliance. Xian Xiaozi did not know what the others were thinking, but he was extremely shocked. Ji Yan's identity and the cultivation base of his favorite disciple. Perfected Shiyu was one of the most famous cultivators in the Tao Alliance. Although he did not have a high position in the Tao Alliance, everyone believed that Perfected Shiyu would become a key figure in the Tao Alliance when the time came. However, such a person with a bright future had betrayed the Tao Alliance. Defecting from the Tao Alliance to the Heaven Alliance was like a slap in the face to Perfected Ji Yan and all the cultivators in the Tao Alliance. Damn it, if it was me, how could I? Xian Xiaozi thought to himself. However, at this moment, an unbelievable thought appeared in his mind. He raised his head and could not help but ask, Vice Alliance leader, could it be that the Heaven Alliance has a way to repair one's lifespan? Ji Yan was shocked as well. Then, as if he suddenly realized something, he said, yes, you're right. That's right. If the Heaven Alliance did not have a way to repair one's lifespan, how could Shiyu give up his current identity? What's more, I haven't finished yet. Many famous cultivators of the Tao Alliance have disappeared during these 10 years. Old man Gu Qiong nodded. He looked at Ji Yan and said, if that's the case, Ji Yan, it's time for us to use our trump cards. Otherwise, the Heaven Alliance will laugh at us. Yes, I understand. Although Taoist Ji Yan was also a late-stage tribulation crossing cultivator, he was still a junior in front of old man Gu Qiong. After the matter with the Heaven Alliance, I would like to remind all of you that there have been many demon clansmen appearing in our Tao Alliance recently. These demon clansmen might have been hiding in our Yilan mainland after the last Taoist demon war. I reckon that they have seen the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and are using it to stir up trouble. Taoist Ji Yan calmed his anger and said, according to reliable sources, the devil race seems to be up to something. Nearly 2 million disciples from 20 or so families have been killed in our Tao Alliance's territory. But even now, we still haven't figured out what they are trying to do. If you see any devils, you must attack them without mercy. After you kill them, you must send the news back to the Tao Alliance. Yes, we understand. The group of cultivators replied. Earlier, this old man said that we will be discussing a few important matters today. The previous discussions all involve high-level cultivators. Later on, we will be discussing low-level cultivators and new disciples. Taoist Ji Yan said solemnly, if there are no new disciples, then there are no low-level cultivators. Without low-level cultivators, there can be no high-level cultivators. Without high-level cultivators, our Tao Alliance would cease to exist. Taoist Ji Yan looked around and said in a heavy tone, I'm sure all of you know what I'm going to say, right? Alas, of course. Fairy Mo Yun said with a sigh, which sect isn't worried about the selection of disciples? Which sect doesn't have to worry about their cultivation methods? Yes, that's right. Taoist Ji Yan didn't hide anything. I'll be frank with all of you. Up until now, my Chongshi sect hasn't found a suitable method to select disciples. Moreover, the cultivation techniques that my disciples have modified haven't had any special effects. Judging from this, I believe that there should be a decent sect or clan in our Tao Alliance that can perfectly resolve these two issues. Therefore, this old man invited Lord Alliance Master to come to the Alliance Conference today to ask him to lead the way. All the sects and clans will work together once again. Don't hide anything. Tell him all the hard work we have done in the past. I hope he can find a way for our Tao Alliance's juniors to survive. Taoist Ji Yan then took out a jade slip and respectfully handed it to old man Gu Qiong. Lord Alliance Master, these are 3 cultivation techniques that my Chongshi sect has modified over the past several hundred years and a method to select disciples. Please take a look. Old man Gu Qiong nodded slightly and took a look. Then, he raised his voice and said, the Chongshi sect's method to select disciples is called bone sifting. It looks like they're selecting disciples based on their bone attributes. Over the past 300 years, they've selected 30,000 disciples. At the same time, the Chongshi sect modified 3 cultivation techniques for the qi condensation realm, earth, wood, and water. The 30,000 disciples each cultivated these 3 techniques, but Old man Gu Qiong hesitated for a moment before continuing. Of the 30,000 disciples, only 4,000 reached peak qi condensation. The rest were stuck at a bottleneck. Of the 4,000 disciples, not a single one reached foundation establishment. The cultivators were in an uproar. Taoist Ji Yen smiled wryly. It's clear that our bone sifting didn't select disciples who were suitable for cultivation. Moreover, the cultivation techniques we modified were also failures. Of course, I've given the bone sifting method and the modified cultivation techniques to the Alliance Master. If you're interested, you can apply to the Dao Alliance. The Dao Alliance won't hide anything. On a leaf not far from Fairy Mo Yun, a cultivator in a long robe sat cross-legged. He hadn't said much and had only watched indifferently. After hearing Taoist Ji Yan's words, he hesitated for a moment before standing up and saying, since Taoist Ji Yan is so generous, I won't hide anything. Although I'm a rogue cultivator, I've taken in a few disciples. However, I couldn't refuse their pleas, so I created a method to select disciples and modified a cultivation technique. Senior Gu Qiong, please take a look. Good, good. Old man Gu Qiong clapped his hands. Even the proud and aloof Yu Hongzi has spoken. The Dao Alliance will definitely gain a lot today. Old man Gu Qiong took a look at the jade slip and said, Yu Hongzi's disciple selection method is different from the bone sifting method. It's based on the meridians and is called pulse identification. Old man Gu Qiong then explained Yu Hongzi's pulse identification method and the effects of the modified cultivation technique. Because Yu Hongzi was a rogue cultivator and didn't have many disciples, his pulse identification method and modified cultivation technique hadn't been tested much. However, based on the limited experience of Yu Hongzi's disciples, these 2 cultivation techniques weren't much better than the bone sifting method. It seems that I'll have to throw a brick to attract jade. When old man Gu Qiong finished speaking, the Yi family patriarch stood up and took out a jade slip from his pocket. He handed it to old man Gu Qiong and said, as everyone knows, the bloodline of the Yi family's descendants is different, so we don't need to select any disciples. After the heaven and earth spirit qi changed, we modified 2 cultivation techniques. These 2 cultivation techniques are commonly used in the Yi family and are targeted at the descendants of the Yi family. Now that I've taken them out, perhaps they will be useful to the Dao Alliance. Old man Gu Qiong didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the jade slip with his divine sense and pondered for a moment before solemnly putting it away. He then bowed to the Yi family patriarch and said, Yi Zhen, I thank the Yi family on behalf of all the disciples of the Dao Alliance. Although these 2 cultivation techniques aren't useful for their cultivation, the modification method. If I'm not wrong, it should be more than twice as good as the previous 2. What? Both Ji Yan and Yu Hongzi were stunned. They stared at old man Gu Qiong in disbelief. The Yi family patriarch bowed humbly and said, Senior Gu Qiong, you're too polite. The Yi family is a member of the Dao Alliance in the Yi Lin continent. Since we've made some progress in modifying the cultivation techniques, we naturally want to share it with everyone. If the Dao Alliance has any other good things, I hope you won't forget about the Yi family. Of course, of course. Old man Gu Qiong smiled and handed 2 jade slips to Yi Zhen. These are from Yu Hongzi and Ji Yan. Take a look first. Okay. Yizhen took the jade slips and made 2 copies before returning them to old man Gu Qiong. Then, he sat down cross-legged and read them. Since Yizhen had read their jade slips, Yu Hongzi and Ji Yan felt relieved. Sure enough, old man Gu Qiong waved his hand and handed the 2 jade slips to them. Hiss! Ji Yan gasped and looked at Yizhen in disbelief. He said in a low voice, "Patriarchy, I underestimated the Yi family." Huh, so be it. It's all in the past. It doesn't matter. After reading the 2 jade slips, the Yi family patriarch replied with a smile, "Let's see what other fellow Taoists have to say." That's right. Ji Yan raised the jade slips and said with a smile, "Senior Gu Qiong was wrong. The Yi family's modification of the cultivation techniques is ingenious. It's several times more effective than my modification. If we modify it according to the Yi family's thinking, we can even modify foundation establishment and golden core cultivation techniques, let alone qi refinement techniques. Everyone, if anyone has a new cultivation technique or a new disciple selection technique, please share it. I'll let you study it first." Chapter 4883. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth had been changing for hundreds of years, and every sect had tried to do something about it. Even a small sect like the Chanha sect had tried to change it, so how could other powerful sects not do anything about it? Now that old man Gu Qiong and Ji Yan Zhenren were so enthusiastic about the Yi family's cultivation techniques, dozens of late-stage tribulation-passing cultivators could no longer sit still. They took out their modified cultivation techniques and disciple selection methods and handed them to old man Gu Qiong, hoping to exchange them with the Yi family's cultivation techniques. Old man Gu Qiong wasn't in a hurry. He read every cultivation technique he obtained and then recited it in a loud voice. Not to mention the cultivators on the treetop, even Xian Xiaozi could hear him clearly. Unfortunately, Xian Xiaozi was only envious. He knew that although the fallen immortal sect was the biggest sect in the Fengyan kingdom, it was nothing compared to the other sections. That day, Xian Xiaozi had also tried it. He was only waiting for the Chu-Pu Immortal Alliance's turn to offer the jade slip so that he could obtain better cultivation techniques and secret techniques. The Yilan continent was indeed the place where the Dao sect was at its peak. Not to mention the Heaven Alliance that was on par with the Dao Alliance, just the Dao Alliance's tribulation-passing cultivators' methods of selecting disciples covered almost every aspect of the Dao sect's cultivation. In addition to the previous bone sifting and pulse distinguishing, there were also secret techniques such as physique observation, spirit observation, heart observation, sea exploration, palace extraction, and so on. These secret techniques examined the cultivator's physique, bloodline, heart, meridians, lower dantian, and Naiwan palace to find out the differences in their disciples. In fact, there were different methods and different incantations for each of the secret techniques, such as observing one's appearance and spirit. There were all kinds of strange and bizarre techniques. It took old man Gu Qiong 10 days to explain the secret arts and cultivation methods of the crossing tribulation stage cultivators. While old man Gu Qiong was explaining, the other cultivators were also copying and comprehending the secret arts and cultivation methods. They didn't really need to comprehend the cultivation methods, they just wanted to see what other cultivators thought of and see if there were any unique paths. Although there were dozens of cultivation methods, they were able to see them all in 10 days. When old man Gu Qiong finished explaining the last jade slip, he copied it and distributed it to the rest of the cultivators. Some of them looked disappointed, while others looked happy. There were all kinds of expressions on their faces. On the other hand, old man Gu Qiong, who was the alliance master, remained calm and confident. Sure enough, after Ji Yan finished reading the last jade slip, he asked old man Gu Qiong with a smile, "Master Alliance, we've all taken out the secret techniques and cultivation techniques of our sections. Please don't keep them to yourself." Cough, cough. Old man Gu Qiong coughed and said with a smile, "This old man is older than all of you, and his cultivation is slightly stronger than yours. But what you think, this old man can also think of. But how can what this old man can think of compare to what you all can think of? This old man has also considered the method of selecting disciples, but after thinking about it, I feel that regardless of whether it is the secret technique of my Tao sect, it seems to be affected by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Under this change, it is unlikely to find a reliable method. If I want to change, I can only rely on external forces. Therefore, I gave up on the Tao sect spells and began to think of other methods. Ji Yen Immortal was surprised again and asked anxiously, Alliance Master, are you talking about the Heavenly Alliance's primordial spirit technique? That's right. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and said, as the saying goes, stones from other mountains can be used to polish jade. Since the primordial spirit technique can stand tall in the Heavenly Alliance, there must be something special about it. Therefore, I looked for some cultivation techniques in this area and studied them carefully. Then, after spending 100 years of effort, I finally found a method of selecting disciples called origin selection. With that, old man Gu Qiong took out dozens of jade slips that he had copied and waved his hand to show them to the cultivators. Ji Yen Jinren could not wait any longer. He picked up the jade slip and immersed his spiritual force into it. A moment later, Ji Yen Jinren said in surprise, Alliance Master, you're saying that Sky Illumination Palace used this method to select 50,000 disciples, and 30% of them have cultivated to foundation establishment. That's right. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and said, although 30% is still a lot less than usual, it's still much better than the current method of selecting disciples. Moreover, I think, the reason why the other disciples can't cultivate to the foundation establishment stage is because there is a problem with the cultivation technique that I modified. If I use the Yi family's cultivation technique as a reference, I'm confident that I can raise 30% of the disciples to 50%. Good, good, good. Ji Yen Immortal clapped his hands and said, 50% is already very high. Now, only 10% of the disciples selected by the Chongshi sect can cultivate. However, if we recruit all the disciples, we don't have that many disciples to teach. With your secret technique, we won't have to worry about anything in the future. Don't worry. Old man Gu Qiong chuckled and pointed to the area under the tree. There are 81 immortal alliances in the Tao Alliance, and each of them has many cultivation sects and families. Although their cultivation realms may not be as good as ours, they might have unique secret techniques. Of course. Ji Yen Immortal naturally thought that old man Gu Qiong was talking to the cultivators of the other immortal alliances. He didn't believe that there were cultivators in the Tao Alliance who were more knowledgeable than old man Gu Qiong and himself, who could create a more effective and unique secret technique. Ji Yen Immortal was not surprised. Although half of the cultivators from the 23 countries, 65 sects, 17 families, and 8 itinerant cultivators of the Law Hong Immortal Alliance shared their secret techniques, and 2 families even modified their cultivation techniques, these secret techniques were too crude and didn't catch Ji Yen Immortal's attention. However, Ji Yen Immortal still ordered these cultivators to make copies of the secret techniques and give them to the Alliance Master of the Law Hong Immortal Alliance, Ji Yen Immortal Alliance, Ji Yen Immortal Alliance. He also said some words of encouragement before he allowed the Chongshi Immortal Alliance to share the secret techniques. Seeing that Ji Yen allowed the Law Hong Immortal Alliance, which was the closest to the Heaven Alliance, to share the secret techniques, Xian Xiaozi knew that it would be the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's turn several weeks later. As he listened to the secret techniques, he took out the storage ring that Huang Su had given him and checked it with his divine will. The more he looked, the more he felt happy and worried. He was happy because Huang Qiong's spiritual master's remains and belongings were all in the storage ring. Even the heavenly cycle demon subduing star array flags were not missing. This would be extremely helpful to his future cultivation and the fallen immortal sect's strength. He was worried because even Huang Qiong's spiritual master couldn't pass the lightning tribulation, so how could he compare with him? How could he pass the lightning tribulation and enter the tribulation transcendence stage? Moreover, even if he entered the tribulation transcendence stage, these late-stage and mid-stage tribulation transcendence stage cultivators couldn't escape the clutches of the heaven and earth spiritual cheese mutation. How could he survive? Chapter 4884. Sigh. Xian Xiaozi sighed and kept all the items. He thought to himself, it's better to be practical. Let's listen to how the other sects choose their disciples. Even if I can't pass the tribulation, I can't let the fallen celestial sect continue to decline in my hands. With that thought in mind, Xian Xiaozi's divine thought was about to leave his body. However, at that moment, he caught sight of the lone jade slip in his storage ring. Instantly, Xian Xiaozi recalled Huang Su's words and expression. His heart skipped a beat as he seemed to have understood something. He knew a lot about Huang Su's character, and knew that if there was nothing important, this guy would never make a trip to Night Wind Valley with such great fanfare. Although the Royal Dome's spiritual master's relic was important, why would Huang Su leave a jade slip in his storage ring if there was nothing more important? Xian Xiaozi took out the jade slip and inserted his divine thought into it. As soon as Xian Xiaozi saw it, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. In fact, he almost jumped up from the tree leaf. How is this possible? The Chanha sect has a spiritual root selection technique? Xian Xiaozi exclaimed. Maybe, there's even a modified technique. 10 disciples of the Kanxian Hall, including Zhijun, went missing because of this? Suddenly, Alliance Master Wen Jie's voice rang in Xian Xiaozi's ears. Xian Xiaozi of the Fallen Celestial Sect, does your Fallen Celestial Sect have a spiritual root selection technique? Huh? Xian Xiaozi was stunned. He looked at Wen Jie in confusion and asked, Alliance Master Wen, why is it my Fallen Celestial Sect's turn so soon? Xian Xiaozi, you must be distracted. Yu Jiangling whispered, after the Lu Hong Celestial Alliance, it was the Lofty Creek Celestial Alliance's turn. The Alliance Master saw that the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects were similar and there was nothing new. If he were to list them one by one, wouldn't it take more than 10 days? He asked the Alliance Masters to collect the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects and clans. If there's nothing new, there's no need to report it. Of course, if there's anything new, the Alliance Master said that he'll reward you handsomely. Xian Xiaozi. Wen Jie smiled. If the Fallen Celestial Sect doesn't have anything to try, don't force yourself. Humph, he's only at the late body integration stage. What secret technique could he possibly have? Li Pan couldn't see through the sect leader and the family head. Seeing this, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Hee. Xian Xiaozi looked at Li Pan with disdain as well and laughed coldly. How could a rogue cultivator like you know the true strength of the fallen immortal sect? Even though you're already at the early stage of the great vehicle stage, you can't compare to the foundation of the fallen immortal sect. As he spoke, Xian Xiaozi stood up and raised his hand. Lord Alliance Leader, I have a spirit root selection method here. It seems to be quite unique, and I can provide you with a reference. Although Daoist Ji Yan and Old Man Gu Qiong were a little disappointed, they still kept their eyes on the Alliance meeting. When they saw the group of cultivators passing the jade slips to their Alliance Master in an orderly manner, a cultivator at the edge of the group stood up and immediately pricked up their ears. Spiritual roots. Ji Yan and Old Man Gu Qiong were stunned and looked at each other in confusion. Old Man Gu Qiong asked pleasantly, who are you? What is this spiritual root you're talking about? After Old Man Gu Qiong spoke, the Alliance meeting fell silent again. Apart from the cultivators who were passing the jade slips to the Alliance Master, everyone's eyes fell on Xian Xiaozi. Xian Xiaozi took a deep breath and replied, I'm Xian Xiaozi from the fallen immortal sect of the Tsiupu Immortal Alliance's Fengyan Kingdom. I've obtained a secret technique for selecting disciples called the spiritual root selection method. Although I haven't fully comprehended it, I feel that although this secret technique is profound, it's simple and easy to learn. Moreover, it's very likely that there's a cultivation technique that's related to this spiritual root selection method. Oh, so you obtained it. You didn't comprehend it yourself. Old man Gu Qiong smiled and was about to say something when he suddenly realized that Xian Xiaozi's secret technique wasn't worth his time. However, if Xian Xiaozi obtained it from someone else, it might be of some value. Hence, his smile disappeared and he hurriedly asked, "What is this spiritual root? How did you obtain this cultivation technique?" Alliance Master, I can't see what this spiritual root is. Moreover, the cultivation technique doesn't mention what this spiritual root is. Xian Xiaozi's forehead was covered in sweat when he realized that he didn't answer this question. He hurriedly replied, "It said that this cultivation technique was comprehended by a senior who went into seclusion before the spiritual qi of heaven and earth changed." Oh, he created this secret technique when he came out of seclusion and saw the change in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Who? Which fellow Taoist? Ji Yan couldn't help but ask. Senior Zhang Xiaohua. Huang Su naturally learned Xiaohua's name from Yu Shuahong and recorded the entire process in detail in the jade slip. Huang Su didn't dare to hide anything from Yu Shuahong. Boom. Before Ji Yan could speak, most of the cultivators laughed. Not only because they had never heard of a senior with this name, but also because this name was too rustic. It didn't sound like the name of a senior expert at all. However, Ji Yan didn't laugh. Old man Gu Qiong didn't laugh either. Even the tribulation-passing cultivators on the tree crown didn't laugh. The reason was simple. Even though Xian Xiaozi was not a high-level cultivator, he was still the sect leader of a sect. Many of the methods to select disciples had already appeared in the Tao Alliance, and Xian Xiaozi must have heard of them. Now that he was able to come up with a selection method that even he himself could not explain, it meant that either the selection method was a castle in the sky, a mere pretense, or it was a unique method of its own. As for the name, it was just a few words. Who would take it seriously? Old man Gu Qiong had a premonition that only tribulation-transcending cultivators would have. He even had a feeling that there was always a way out. Suppressing the surprise in his heart, he asked aloud, "Xian Xiaozi, are you sure you don't know what this spiritual root is? And can this spiritual root really select disciples?" "Of course, I'm very sure." Xian Xiaozi nodded and said, "This spiritual root is completely different from the bone sifting and origin sifting. I can't understand it at all. As for the selection of disciples, I only know that the Chanha sect of the Fengyan kingdom used this secret technique to select thousands of disciples." Buzz. This time, the commotion didn't come from other places but from the tree crown. Apart from the Yi clan's patriarch, Ji Yan Zhenren, and old man Gu Qiong, the other tribulation-passing cultivators couldn't help but whisper among themselves. They didn't know what kind of sect the Chanha sect was. However, even though it was an unknown sect, it was still able to select thousands of disciples when the spiritual qi of heaven and earth changed. Regardless of what kind of cultivation method they had, this number was still shocking. The Yi clan's patriarch glanced at old man Gu Qiong and said, "Xian Xiaozi, how are the talents of these thousands of disciples? How's their cultivation progress?" Xian Xiaozi said respectfully, "Senior, I don't know. I only received a message from my disciple, Huang Su, before I entered the Alliance conference. Recently. About a month ago, the disciples of the Chanha sect discovered the location where the fallen immortal sect's spiritual master Huang Qiong failed to transcend the tribulation near the western wild mountain range of the Fengyan kingdom. They met Senior Zhang Xiaohua, who had just come out of seclusion. Then, Senior Zhang Xiaohua temporarily stayed in the nebula ridge of the Chanha sect and taught the Chanha sect the method of selecting spirit roots. According to Yu Shuahong of the Chanha sect, Senior Zhang promised to modify the cultivation method for Lu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Chanha sect. However, Lu Hanhuan was afraid of getting into trouble and didn't dare to agree. I think, these disciples who were selected haven't cultivated yet. I see. Wanderer Fu Bo laughed. It's just a cultivation method that hasn't been tested yet. It really gave me a shock. I really didn't expect that there would be a cultivator more powerful than Senior Gu Qiong in the Yilan continent who could create a more miraculous method than the origin sifting. Oh. In that case, Huan Qiongzhenren, who was the first to fail the tribulation, has already been found. Perfected Ji Yen was disappointed when he heard that. He no longer wanted to find out more about the method to select spiritual roots and changed the topic. Vice Alliance Leader, that's indeed the case. Xian Xiaozi replied. However, I haven't looked into it in detail. If I find anything valuable, I'll pass it to Alliance Leader Wen Jia of the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. He'll pass it on to the Dao Alliance. Great. Perfected Ji Yen smiled. Make a copy of the jade slip with the method to select spiritual roots and pass it to Wen Jia. After he passes it on to the Dao Alliance, if it's useful, I'll definitely severely injure the fallen immortal sect. Yes, I understand. Xian Xiaozi had achieved his goal when he heard that his name had reached Perfected Ji Yan's ears. He looked at Wen Jia, whose face was filled with gratitude, and was about to make a copy of the jade slip. At that moment, an unhappy voice said impatiently, Xian Xiaozi, tell me about the secret method to select spiritual roots. That voice belonged to old man Gu Qiong. He had wanted to take the jade slip from Xian Xiaozi's mouth, but Wanderer Fu Bo and Perfected Ji Yen had interrupted him, so he couldn't say anything. Seeing that Perfected Ji Yen was looking down on Xian Xiaozi, he couldn't help but speak up. Perfected Ji Yen was stunned and shook his head with a bitter smile. He really didn't think much of it because he felt that old man Gu Qiong didn't care about the affairs of the Dao Alliance and didn't know what the cultivators of the Dao Alliance were thinking. Xian Xiaozi's actions were clearly trying to please the crowd. Xian Xiaozi was naturally even happier. He glanced at Li Pan proudly and took out the jade slip. He immersed his divine thought into it and read, word by word, those who possess spiritual roots are the roots of the heaven and earth bell spirit in the cultivator's body. They can contain the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and form spiritual cavities for the cultivator's use. This is the method to select the spiritual roots. Chapter 4885. Xian Xiaozi's voice was neither fast nor slow as he explained the spiritual root selection method that Xiaohua had given to the Chanhe sect. The cultivation method was not very long, but it covered the 5 elemental spiritual roots of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and even the wind, thunder, ice, and other mutated spiritual roots. It even included the obscure light and darkness spiritual roots that no one had ever heard of before. As Gu Qiong old man listened, his expression changed drastically. He opened his mouth several times, wanting to speak, but he held himself back. When Xian Xiaozi finally finished, Gu Qiong old man immediately shouted, Ji Yen. Quick, bring this jade slip to me at all costs. Okay. Ji Yen was naturally fascinated. Regardless of whether Xiaohua's spiritual root selection method was correct or not, Ji Yen could tell from the completeness and rigor of the cultivation method that it was not something that could be created in a few days or months. It was also not something that his or Gu Qiong old man's cultivation method could compare to. He nodded and pressed down on the tree trunk below him. With a loud bang, the crown of the tree shook violently. Clusters of dark green light appeared all over the tree like the brilliance of the moon and stars. These lights did not appear from top to bottom in an orderly manner, nor did they appear from Ji Yen to Xian Xiaozi. Instead, they appeared from the roots, branches, and trunk in a disorderly manner. In the end, a branch that was extremely far away from Xian Xiaozi trembled rapidly, and an extremely dazzling halo appeared like a star. At the same time, a palm-sized whirlpool suddenly appeared on the branch in front of Xian Xiaozi. Black and white threads of light appeared from the whirlpool, and waves of desolate coldness emanated from it. At this moment, Ji Yan's voice came from the whirlpool. Xian Xiaozi, quickly put the jade slip in. My lifespan is starting to run out, yes, senior. Xian Xiaozi was shocked and did not dare to delay. He hurriedly threw the jade slip into the whirlpool. Whoosh! The moment the jade slip landed on the branch, a dark green light flashed, and the whirlpool quickly disappeared. The dazzling star in the distance also dimmed, whoosh. When the light on the Tree of Alliances was extinguished, Daoist Ji Yan raised his hand. In his hand was the jade slip that Xian Xiaozi had placed in the vortex. Hearing this, Daoist Ji Yan let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly. I'm ashamed. It's just retrieving a jade slip through the Dao tree, and I am already somewhat powerless. He, fellow Daoist Ji Yan has already done well. The Yi clan patriarch laughed. Don't be fooled by how short this distance is. Fellow Daoist, this divine ability of yours has already traversed nearly half of the Yi Lin continent. In the entire Dao Alliance, you are probably the only one with such power. Alas! Old man Gu Qiong sighed. The change in spiritual energy is a great tribulation of heaven and earth, and we have no choice but to face it. Ji Yan Jinren nodded and waved the jade slip in his hand. The great Tao is just. There will always be a way for people to survive. Although the world's spirit energy has only been here for a few hundred years, we can't find a way to survive. The further we go, the more helpless we will be. I hope this so-called spiritual root selection method can help us find a glimmer of hope. Ji Yan, take a look at this. Old man Gu Qiong calmed down when he saw the jade slip. He smiled and said, I only listened to it once and didn't think about it carefully. However, it seems that this is indeed a complete cultivation method and not something that was randomly made up. You're right, senior. Ji Yan Jinren nodded and said, I've noticed it too. Although this cultivation method is marvelous, the incantation is easy to understand. Even nascent soul cultivators and golden core cultivators can practice it, let alone us. It's very similar to the disciple selection method that my Dao sect usually uses. Ji Yan Jinren didn't stand on ceremony and scanned the jade slip with his divine sense. Listening to Xian Xiaozi recite it once and scanning it with his divine sense was different. Ji Yan Jinren's expression was grave as he scanned the jade slip. After a few minutes, he withdrew his divine sense and took out a blank jade slip without hesitation. He copied the cultivation method in it and handed it to old man Gu Qiong. He said in a low voice, Senior, take a look. I seem to see something in this cultivation method. Ji Yan Jinren didn't finish his sentence. He looked at Xian Xiaozi and said loudly, Xian Xiaozi. You've done a great service to the Dao Alliance. Needless to say, the Dao Alliance will reward you handsomely after this. Yes, yes. Xian Xiaozi was overjoyed. He had already seen the importance of this cultivation method from how much old man Gu Qiong valued it. The reward was beyond his expectations. He smiled and replied, I'm a member of the Dao Alliance. Although the fallen immortal sect is at the edge of the Dao Alliance, under the leadership of Alliance Master Wen Jia, all the countries are loyal to the Dao Alliance. It's my honor to be able to contribute to the Dao Alliance. Good, it's good that you have such intentions. Ji Yan Jinren said perfunctorily and looked at old man Gu Qiong. Old man Gu Qiong studied the jade slip for a much longer time than Ji Yan Jinren. His expression was more interesting than Ji Yan's. His expression was grave at first, then shock, then amazement, emotion, admiration, and sighs. All kinds of emotions flashed across his face like flowers. The Yi family's patriarch and the others were puzzled. They couldn't help but recite the spiritual root selection method that Xian Xiaozi had just recited. Wonderful! 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 In the end, old man Gu Qiong closed his eyes and held the jade slip in his hand. He opened his mouth and exclaimed 3 times. His voice penetrated the space and caused the entire alliance tree to tremble 3 times. Seeing old man Gu Qiong open his eyes, Ji Yanjinren asked in a low voice, "Senior, did you see the secret behind it?" "Ha, Ji Yan, if you can see it, why can't I?" Old man Gu Qiong smiled and said, "Although this spiritual root is illusory and I can't see what it is, I can still sense the shadow of witchcraft. I've studied the incomplete book from the Woman Mountain Range in my early years. Although I'm not proficient in it, I can still sense the faint traces. How should we deal with this spiritual root selection method?" Ji Yanjinren seemed to be asking, but he seemed to have made a decision long ago. Old man Gu Qiong replied without hesitation, "All rivers flow into the sea, and all rivers flow into one. At this point, can we still be constrained by factions?" Ji Yanjinren clapped his hands and said, "Yes, I agree with you, senior." Then, Ji Yanjinren raised his voice and said, "Yes, Alliance Master. Reward the fallen immortal sect. Immediately, make a copy of this jade slip and distribute it to the various sects, clans, and sects of our Tao Alliance. Regardless of Mo Wen's background, I guarantee that everyone will have a copy." When the cultivators of the Tao Alliance heard this, they were all shocked. They knew very well that the Tao Alliance had passed down countless techniques since its founding, but none of them had ever been so highly valued by the Alliance Lord, nor had there ever been a technique that would require every single sect to acquire one. Also, old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, while making a copy of the jade slip, "Find 10,000 disciples from the factions near the dragon tomb who are waiting to be selected. We'll test this spiritual root selection method on the spot during the Alliance meeting." "Okay. I'll pass down the order right away." Taoist Ji Yan replied and whispered a few words to the ground. He raised his hand and a jade slip fell down. There was a flash of light at the top of the tree and a figure flashed by. The jade slip disappeared along with the figure. Clearly, a disciple of the Tao Alliance had left to carry out the order. "I hope the selected disciples will be able to cultivate it," old man Gu Qiong said with a smile. However, before he could finish his sentence, he was taken aback. He took out the jade slip again and looked at it. Then, he asked Xian Shaozi, "Why isn't there any spiritual root cultivation technique in this jade slip?" "Alliance Master." Xian Shaozi hurriedly stood up and replied innocently, "I've already said that my disciple of the fallen immortal sect just obtained this cultivation technique from Xingyin Ridge. The sect leader of the Chanha sect is hesitant to modify this cultivation technique." Hiss. Old man Gu Qiong gasped and stood up abruptly. "Xian Shaozi, didn't you just say that your disciple went missing when he returned to the sect?" "That's right. I'm not too sure about the details." Xian Shaozi seemed to have understood something as well. He quickly nodded and said, "However, they went missing when they were returning to the sect to deliver the other set of spiritual root selection methods." "Damn it!" Ji Yanjinren clapped his hands and said, "This must be the doing of the Heaven Alliance. The Fengyan nation is located at the edge of the Tao Alliance, and it rarely interacts with the Heaven Alliance. I don't think the Heaven Alliance would extend its reach that far. However, Xian Shaozi, there must be a spy from the Heaven Alliance among your missing disciples." But these disciples. Xian Shaozi wanted to say that these disciples were the trusted subordinates of the fallen immortal sect from all over the Fengyan nation. However, when he thought about it, even perfected West Moon was a member of the Heaven Alliance. It was not strange that Exiled King or Exiled King's disciples were from the Heaven Alliance. Oh no! Gu Qiong old man was even more shocked when he heard Ji Yan's words. He exchanged a look with Ji Yanjinren and said in unison, "The Chanha sect is in danger. Hurry!" Ji Yanjinren lowered his head to give the order, but before he could say anything, he turned to the branch where Xian Shaozi was and roared thunderously, "Where are the disciples of the Tao Alliance guarding the Night Wind Valley?" "I'm here." A disciple wearing armor appeared on a tree branch next to Chu Pu. Immortal Alliances 1. Jia Alliance Master. Vice Alliance Master, what are your orders? Send 10,000 of the most powerful disciples in the Night Wind Valley. Head to the Fengyan Nation's Nebula Ridge as soon as possible to protect the Chanha sect and invite the sect master of the Chanha sect, as well as the disciples related to Zhang Xiaohua to the Dao Alliance. Ji Yan Jinren ordered without hesitation. Yes, I understand. The Dao Alliance disciple was clearly confused, but he quickly bowed and was about to disappear. Chapter 4886. Remember. It's urgent. Set up the Continental Teleportation Bridge at all costs. If there's any delay, I'll kill all of you. Ji Yan Jinren had been very humble ever since Elder Gu Qiong arrived, but now, he couldn't help but show his decisiveness and hurriedly added. The Dao Alliance disciple's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to reply, but after a moment of hesitation, he immediately hid his thoughts. After the Dao Alliance disciple left, Ji Yan Jinren was relieved. He handed the copied jade slip to the Yi family patriarch who was not far away and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, take a look. Is it comparable to your modified cultivation technique?" The Yi family patriarch took the jade slip and said with a smile, "I have just thought about the spiritual root selection technique from the beginning to the end several times. This is a complete cultivation technique without any flaws. It's not comparable to Ai's crude cultivation technique. Now, I am looking forward to seeing what's so special about fellow Daoist Zhang's modified cultivation technique. This fellow Daoist Zhang's name is very unfamiliar." Fairy Mo Yun was puzzled. He doesn't seem to be a tribulation-passing cultivator of our Dao Alliance, right? There are two possibilities. Wanderer Fu Bo said with a smile, "This Zhang Xiaohua is not a tribulation-passing cultivator. He might be a Mahayana cultivator or a body integration cultivator. We've never heard of him. The other possibility is that this fellow Daoist is an itinerant cultivator who is unknown. There's another possibility." Ji Yan Jinren's heart skipped a beat and he said in a low voice, "He might be a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance." "Impossible." Yu Hongzi shook his head and said, "I've never seen a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance helping our Dao Alliance so generously, no." Hearing Ji Yan Jinren mention the Heaven Alliance, Elder Gu Qiong, who had just sat down, stood up again and said, "I'm worried. Since a disciple of the fallen immortal sect has gone missing for a long time, I'm still worried. If that fellow Daoist is still in Xingyin Ridge, it's fine. If he's not, how can the Heaven Alliance not see the importance of fellow Daoist Zhang's modified cultivation technique? I'm afraid your disciple won't make it in time. Moreover, if fellow Daoist Zhang is still in Xingyin Ridge, I'm afraid we'll only send a disciple. There will be a problem, fellow Daoist Zhang." "I don't think so. Lord Alliance Master." Yu Hongzi smiled and said, "As Wanderer Fu Bo said, Zhang Xiaohua may not be a cultivator who has transcended the tribulation. Lord Alliance Master, you don't have to make such a big fuss. Furthermore, from the Dragon's Tomb to the Fengyan Kingdom, fellow Daoist Ji Yan had to go through so much trouble just to retrieve a jade slip. Lord Alliance Master had to cross half of the Yi-Lin continent. Why don't we wait for the disciples of the Dao Alliance in Nightwind Valley?" Instead of looking at Yu Hongzi, Elder Gu Qiong said to Ji Yan Jinren, "It doesn't matter whether she is a tribulation transcendence cultivator or not. What matters is that Zhang Xiaohua is a reclusive genius, so we can't treat her lightly." Ji Yan Jinren nodded slightly, indicating that he understood Elder Gu Qiong's meaning. He replied, "Since that's the case, Lord Alliance Master, you can go. We'll make preparations here to test the spirit root technique while preparing to welcome fellow Daoist Zhang Xiaohua." Boom! As soon as Ji Yan finished speaking, Elder Gu Qiong slapped his forehead, and a fiery red light shot up into the sky like a volcanic eruption. Then, a 90-meter tall nascent soul wearing spirit armor flew out of the light. As soon as the nascent soul appeared, an overwhelming aura emanated from the nascent soul, enveloping the surrounding space. Light and shadow distorted, and even the alliance tree wrinkled and swayed in this light and shadow. Immediately, the nascent soul made a gesture with both hands, and a strange light silk more dense than a spider web fell into the void. In front of the nascent soul, a few acres of space began to boil, and layers of thin bubbles flashed with black and white halos rushed out. After a moment, the nascent soul put his hands together and pushed toward the space. Schwa! The black and white halos twisted and formed a vortex. Then, the nascent soul swung its arms as if it was grinding a mill, and the vortex gradually grew larger and rapidly spread into the depths of the void. What was special was that the vortex grew larger, and rumbling sounds came from the vortex. Countless small snake-like black thunderbolts appeared in the cracks of the vortex, and the entire space began to shake. Good heavens! Lightning flashed on the Yi family ancestor's face, and he couldn't help but whisper, "I haven't seen Elder Gu Qiong for 1,000 years, and his strength has reached such a level. I can't compare to him." As soon as the Yi family ancestor finished speaking, a three-colored light suddenly flashed around the nascent soul. This light and shadow came from the nascent soul's four limbs and rapidly gathered between its eyebrows. A star-shaped mark appeared in the blink of an eye. A nascent soul projection. The Yi family ancestor was stunned. He looked at Elder Gu Qiong's nascent soul in disbelief and whispered in his heart, "How can a nascent soul have a nascent soul projection? What's going on?" Before the Yi family ancestor could figure it out, Elder Gu Qiong's nascent soul swayed and fell into the void vortex, disappearing in a moment. When the black and white thunderbolts gradually disappeared, the space vortex also disappeared. Vagabond Fu Bo blinked his eyes and looked at the crowd. Then, he said to Ji Yen Jinren, Deputy Alliance Leader, "Forgive me for speaking out of turn. I'm just an itinerant cultivator and I'm ignorant. I seem to have seen the Heavenly Alliance's primordial spirit projection technique. Moreover, I don't understand. From the Dragon Tomb to the Fengyan Kingdom, we have to cross half of the Yi-Lin continent. Even if Senior Gu Qiong is proficient in the void escape technique of the nascent soul realm, he can't go there directly, right?" He. Ji Yen's spiritual master laughed and said, "This is Elder Gu Qiong's secret technique, and he usually doesn't show it to others. However, since he used it in front of everyone today, it seems that he has no intention of hiding it anymore. Then, I'll explain it to you. What you saw was right. Elder Gu Qiong used the nascent soul projection technique, which is rare even among the cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance. However, this nascent soul projection technique is different from that of the Heavenly Alliance. We cultivators of the Tao Alliance don't have powerful nascent souls. After Elder Gu Qiong modified it, he can use his nascent soul. Also, our physical bodies can't use the void escape technique, but nascent souls are spiritual bodies and can withstand the pressure of the void. If I'm not wrong, Elder Gu Qiong first used the void escape technique to let his nascent soul get as close to the Fengyan Kingdom as possible. When his nascent soul couldn't escape, he used the nascent soul projection technique to project his nascent soul to the Xingyin Ridge. Elder Gu Qiong's Dharma spells are too wonderful. We can't compare to him. A cultivator who was in the Tribulation Transcendence realm sighed. This step involves the nascent soul escape technique and the improved nascent soul projection technique. He has all kinds of wonderful Dharma spells at his fingertips. I can't believe it. Since Elder Gu Qiong has gone, the Xingyin Ridge will be fine. The Yi family's patriarch said meaningfully, Deputy Alliance Leader, should we ask Xian Xiaozi to tell us about the Chanhe sect? Actually, the Chanhe sect should be heavily rewarded. That's right. Perfected Ji Yen nodded and said, "You're right, fellow Taoist Yi. I didn't mention the Chanhe sect just now because it's a small sect that isn't listed in the Tao Alliance's list. Even if I told them about it, they wouldn't know. After the Alliance meeting, I'll definitely ask my disciples to reward them heavily." Then, perfected Ji Yen looked at Xian Xiaozi and said, "Tell us about the Chanhe sect." This. Xian Xiaozi was at a loss for words. After all, the Chanhe sect was too small. It was only a sect led by a nascent soul realm cultivator. There were at least dozens of such sects in the Fengyan kingdom, if not hundreds. How would he know? Left with no choice, Xian Xiaozi turned to look at Wen Jie. He was probably asking for help. Wen Jie also wanted to help Xian Xiaozi, but he wasn't from the Fengyan kingdom, so it was even more impossible for him to know about the Chanhe sect. He could only shrug at Xian Xiaozi helplessly. Deputy Alliance Leader. Xian Xiaozi thought for a while and smiled apologetically. The Chanhe sect is an extremely small sect. Their sect leader seems to be only a nascent soul realm cultivator. The ordinary hall masters of the fallen immortal sect are all spirit-severing disciples. Therefore, I really don't know much about the Chanhe sect. Oh, right, the deputy hall master of the fallen immortal sect, Huang Su, was the one who went to the Nebula Ridge. He was also the one who gave me the jade slip before I entered the alliance meeting. Oh, if that's the case, once the alliance meeting begins, the Night Wind Valley's teleportation formation will be sealed. Without the alliance token, no one will be able to use it. Huang Su will only be able to leave if he uses an escape technique. Perfected Ji Yen thought for a while and said, "Furthermore, the Night Wind Valley is surrounded by strong winds. Who would be so bored as to barge in?" The disciple stationed at the Night Wind Valley summoned the fallen immortal sect's disciple, Huang Su, to enter the alliance meeting. Yes, disciple obeys. Another voice came from the tree next to Wen Jie. The figure disappeared in a flash. Everyone was waiting. The Tribulation Transcendence cultivators on the tree crown were copying the spirit root selection technique while discussing the secret technique. Alliance leader Wen Jie smiled at Xian Xiaozi and said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Our Chu Pu Immortal Alliance has never been so popular in the Tao Alliance meeting. Today, we are all basking in your glory. We're really in the limelight today. You're too kind. Isn't this all thanks to Alliance leader Wen's leadership?" Xian Xiaozi said flatteringly. "Humph." Li Pan snorted coldly. "This is the glory of the Chanhe sect. What does it have to do with the fallen immortal sect? If the fallen immortal sect wasn't a member of the Tao Alliance, how would you be rewarded so generously? Stealing other people's credit to make yourself look good? You're really capable of that. Isn't this the legendary Shameless?" Li Pan's words were like swallowing a disgusting fly in Xian Xiaozi's ears. However, Li Pan's words weren't wrong at all. Xian Xiaozi's face flushed red. He was speechless again. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, or tip it. Also, I was supposed to rest today. However, since the alliance leader of Basking in the Moonlight 5 is here, I'll continue to update. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for your support. There are no more chapters left. Chapter 4887. Hee. Wen Jie smiled and said, "Don't be jealous, fellow Taoist Li. This is fate." Although the Chanhe sect met Senior Zhang Xiaohua, they didn't know the importance of the spiritual root selection technique. More importantly, although they are in the Tao Alliance, they can't participate in the Alliance conference directly. Therefore, they could only borrow fellow Taoist Xian Xiaozi's hand and offer up the spiritual root selection technique. As the saying goes, a fine steed is common, but a talent scout is rare. Isn't this the reason? TSK. Li Pan didn't mock Wen Jie because of his status as the alliance leader of the Immortal Alliance. He only looked at Xian Xiaozi with disdain. While everyone was discussing, Wen Jie felt that the branch he was on was trembling. Then, he hurriedly got up and saw that there was a sudden fluctuation at the junction between the branch and the trunk. The fluctuation spread out like ripples, and the outline of a door gradually appeared at the edge of the branch. Whoosh! With a soft sound, Huang Su's figure appeared from the door. There was a hint of excitement on his slightly panicked face. Just as Taoist Ji Yan had expected, Huang Su and Yukong returned to the teleportation array. The array was surrounded by the Tao Alliance's disciples and sealed off the area. How could Huang Su let go of the opportunity to show off in front of Xian Xiaozi? He found a quiet place with Yukong and chatted while waiting for the Alliance conference to end. They waited for a few days. Huang Su didn't seem to be impatient. Just as the two of them were talking about the interesting things about the Fengyan kingdom, a thunderous voice rang out nearby. Dozens of spirit-severing stage cultivators flew out of the Night Wind Valley in an orderly formation and called out Huang Su's name. Huang Su was shocked and had a premonition. He knew that the spiritual root selection technique must have taken effect. Therefore, he quickly flew into the sky and agreed. After the Tao Alliance's disciples verified his identity, they immediately brought Huang Su back to the Alliance conference, leaving Yukong confused. Of course, just as Huang Su's figure disappeared, Yukong came to a realization. He stomped his feet and gritted his teeth. Damn it, this guy must be hiding something from me. Unfortunately, even if Yukong knew, what could he do? Since Huang Su had joined the Alliance conference, his status would definitely be on par with Yukong in the Fallen Immortal sect. Yukong wouldn't be able to do anything to Huang Su. Huang Su naturally understood this as well. Therefore, the moment he stepped into the Alliance, he first looked at the humongous tree in shock. When his gaze landed on Xian Xiaozi, who was sitting cross-legged on a leaf not far away, he immediately wanted to walk over. Unfortunately, it was as if there was an impenetrable wall around Huang Su. He was unable to move at all. Thus, Huang Su came to a halt and bowed towards Xian Xiaozi. Greetings, Sect Master. I've come here on the orders of the Alliance leader. Taoist Ji Yan, Taoist Ji, Taoist Ji. Xian Xiaozi was very satisfied with Huang Su's attitude. However, with a look of panic, he raised his hand and gestured for Huang Su to look at the treetop. Huang Su couldn't tell who Ji Yan was, so he hurriedly bowed and said, "Junior greets Ji Yan." "Get up, Huang Su." Taoist Ji Yan said calmly. "You have contributed greatly to the Tao Alliance by delivering the spiritual root selection method. After the Alliance conference, I will reward the Fallen Immortal sect. You will be rewarded as well." Thank you, Taoist Ji Yan." Huang Su was moved to tears when he heard Taoist Ji Yan's generosity. Taoist Ji Yan continued to ask, however, "How did you know that the Chanhe sect has this spiritual root selection method? How did you get your hands on it? Also, Taoist Zhang Xiaohua, what does she look like? Just wait. Tell me everything you know." Although Huang Su had a guilty conscience, he did not panic. He knew very well that his dealings with the Flying Shadow sect were nothing compared to his own contributions. Therefore, he didn't hide anything. He told Taoist Ji Yan everything and stood there respectfully. However, after waiting for a few minutes, there was no sound from the tree. It was as though Taoist Ji Yan didn't hear Huang Su's report. Huang Su was slightly surprised and looked up at the tree. On the top of the tree, perfected Ji Yan was just like the Yi clan's patriarch and the others. They looked confused and frowned slightly as if they were thinking about something. Even Wanderer Fu Bo and the others looked at each other with their mouths moving. No one knew what they were saying. "Huang Su, you mean?" After a few seconds, Taoist Ji Yan finally said, "Zhang Xiaohua subdued all the beasts of the Flying Shadow sect with a roar." "Yes." Huang Su nodded. "I saw it with my own eyes." "Also, you couldn't sense Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation and couldn't see the fluctuation of his magic power when he flew?" "Yes, that's right." Huang Su answered without hesitation. "Could it be The Yi clan's patriarch hesitated. We made a big fuss over nothing. This spiritual root selection method wasn't created by Zhang Xiaohua. He got it from somewhere else. Huang Su, do you know? Taoist Ji Yan asked loudly. Huang Su thought for a while and answered, I don't know. I only got this method from Yu Zhuohong, a disciple of the Chanha sect. However, Yu Zhuohong said that Senior Zhang taught the disciples of the Chanha sect while selecting disciples. This method should be ready-made. Oh, also, I heard Yu Zhuohong mention that she once brought some cultivation methods for selecting spiritual roots to the Grand Xie Mountain auction house, and she sold dozens of jade slips in the auction house. How many crystals did he sell for each jade slip? The Yi clan's patriarch suddenly asked. Huang Su smiled and said, I didn't ask, but from his tone, it shouldn't be too much. Alas, what a waste. The Yi clan's patriarch sighed. This method is a priceless treasure, but it was sold so cheaply. What a pity. Yes, yes. Huang Su hurriedly said, I realized the importance of this method, so I hurriedly sent Jejun and the others back to the sect to report to my sect master. However, I didn't expect so many things to happen. There are many things that you don't know. Ji Yan Jinren smiled and said, as long as the Heaven Alliance doesn't give up on destroying our Taoist alliance, such strange things will happen. We can only be vigilant and treat it seriously, the Heaven Alliance. Huang Su was stunned and said in shock, how can there be people from the Heaven Alliance in the Fengyan Kingdom? Not only the Fengyan Kingdom, you should say, there are people from the Heaven Alliance in the Fallen Immortal sect. Ji Yan Jinren said sternly. Then, he looked around and said fiercely, everyone, when you return to the sect after the Alliance conference, you must carefully investigate the background of the disciples in the sect. Search carefully and find out who the people from the Heaven Alliance are. Xian Xiaozi and the other cultivators were shocked. Ji Yan Jinren's words were easy, but it was abnormally difficult to do. Since the people from the Heaven Alliance wanted to hide in the various sects, they would naturally remove all traces. Moreover, the disciples of the various sects had been in the sect for many years. How could they find any evidence? Yes, we understand. Everyone answered in unison. However, their voices were a little low. Clearly, they all knew that this was an impossible task. Then, the Yi clan's patriarch, Mo Yun, and a dozen tribulation-passing cultivators asked Huang Su some questions about Zhang Xiaohua. Only then did the alliance conference calm down. Everyone was waiting for Old Man Gu Qiong. However, Old Man Gu Qiong's nascent soul had to cross half of the Yi Lin continent. In order to ensure the success of the nascent soul projection, Old Man Gu Qiong did not leave his nascent soul in his physical body. Therefore, no one knew where Old Man Gu Qiong was or what had happened. However, after only an hour, the Alliance Conference became lively again. This was because the Taoist Alliance's disciples in the Dragon's Tomb had found 10,000 children to be selected from the Taoist Alliance's sects nearby. Taoist Ji Yan and the others smiled as they looked at the leaf that was several acres large and the 10,000 children sitting on it. Of course, there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. The fact that 10,000 children had been found in such a short time meant that the Taoist Alliance's sects really did not have a practical selection method. They had no choice but to temporarily leave these children in their sections. Let the disciples choose 10 children for each of us. Ji Yan Jinren looked at the tribulation-passing cultivators on his left and smiled. Let's compare the selection method we used before and the one we modified with this spiritual root selection method. What do you think? Very well. The cultivators all stood up and answered with smiles. Upon hearing Taoist Master Ji Yan's orders, the Tao Alliance disciples guarding the children immediately raised their hands and casually picked a few hundred children out of the 10,000 children and brought them to the edge of the leaf. Ji Yan Jinren and the others walked to the leaf and stood among the children casually. Then, they began to activate their spells to select the children. Although the spiritual root selection method was simple, Ji Yanjinren and the other tribulation-passing cultivators did not dare to be careless. Each of them cast their spells seriously, and it took them 5 minutes to select one child. Ji Yanjinren looked around in shock. The Yi family's patriarch, Wanderer Fu Bo, and the others who were closest to Ji Yanjinren had the same expression on their faces. Everyone. Ji Yanjinren said, "I'll announce the results of my selection first." Okay. Everyone nodded with eagerness in their eyes. Chapter 48-88. Daoist Ji Yen looked at the 10 children sitting cross-legged in front of him and pointed at them. I used the method before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth mutated to select the 10 children. I was only certain of one of them, and the other 9 were all blurry. When I used the bone sifting technique, I was able to confirm that 3 out of the 10 children could cultivate, and 1 out of the 10 children could not cultivate. As for the other 6 children, I was not sure about them. The child I was certain of was also one of the 3 children. At this point, Daoist Ji Yen paused for a moment and said excitedly, "But I used the spiritual root selection method to confirm that 3 children have earth spiritual roots, 1 child has water spiritual roots, 1 child has fire spiritual roots, and the other 5 children have no spiritual roots. Moreover, among the 3 children that I was able to confirm earlier, only one of them had the earth spiritual root. Furthermore, this child was selected by this old man using the bone sifting technique." He. Fairy Mo Yun laughed and said, "The result of my selection was the exact opposite of yours. Among the 10 children, I was certain of 5 of them with the ordinary selection method and 6 were blurry. However, with the clear mind technique that I modified, I was certain of 3 and the other 7 were blurry. On the other hand, I was only certain of 1 with the so-called mutated ice spiritual roots and the other 9 had no spiritual roots." Fairy Mo Yun, how can you call it the opposite? My result is the opposite. A tribulation-passing cultivator laughed. I used the ordinary selection method to select 5 disciples, but the selection method eliminated these 5 disciples. The other 5 disciples that I couldn't identify had earth spiritual roots. Then, Yi clan's ancestor and the others also reported the results of their selection. Apart from a few cultivators, most of the cultivators used the ordinary and improved selection methods to select disciples, which were different from the selection method. While the cultivators were discussing the advantages and disadvantages of the spiritual root selection method, Daoist Ji Yen said, "Everyone, no matter how good the spiritual root selection method is, after we use it, we can determine which disciple is unsuitable for cultivation, right? This is something that the previous selection method can't compare with. Based on this alone, I feel that the spiritual root selection method is extremely ingenious." That's right, Vice Alliance leader is right. Everyone was convinced. Furthermore, Fairy Mo Yun said softly, "When I was selecting my disciples, I used a secret technique. This secret technique is not something that ordinary cultivators can use. When I activated the spirit root technique, it seemed to be very easy. Even ordinary disciples can use it." Okay. Ji Yanjinren nodded and said, "I've asked some disciples of the Dragon Tomb to study this technique. Now, I'll call them in and have a look." Subsequently, 10 spirit severing stage disciples, 10 nascent soul stage disciples, 10 golden core stage disciples, and 10 foundation establishment stage disciples flew out from the trunk and landed on the huge leaf. At Daoist Ji Yan's command, each of the 40 disciples began to select disciples with spirit roots from the 10 children. In just half a meal's worth of cultivation techniques, 400 children had finished their selection. Ji Yanjinren and the others were still worried, so they personally checked again. They were surprised to find that, except for 3 foundation establishment disciples and 1 golden core disciple, the results of the other disciples' selections were exactly the same as theirs. In other words, this spirit root selection technique could be used by low-level cultivators, and the accuracy rate was very high. After the 40 disciples left, Ji Yanjinren looked at the selected disciples without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking. At the alliance meeting, none of the cultivators said anything because they knew very well what was going on. Since the disciples were selected, they naturally had to cultivate. However, with the change in heaven and earth spirit chi, what kind of cultivation technique would they cultivate? Would it be the original technique or a modified one? Ji Yen Jinren was waiting for old man Gu Qiong to come back. Everything was ready, and now he only needed one thing. However, to everyone's surprise, old man Gu Qiong didn't come back even after several hours. At this moment, a disciple of the Tao Alliance appeared from a trunk to the left of Huang Su. He bowed and reported, Vice Alliance Leader, I was ordered to lead 10,000 cultivators to Nebula Ridge through the Continent Teleportation Bridge. Ji Yen Jinren was obviously anxious. Before the disciple could finish, he scolded, Speak more seriously. Have you seen Alliance Leader? Where are the disciples of the Chanhe faction? Yes. The disciple was used to Ji Yen Jinren's scolding, so he replied concisely, When I arrived there, Alliance Leader had been killed by nearly 10,000 cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance less than 500 kilometers away from Nebula Ridge. I led my subordinates to capture more than 1,000 disabled disciples, clean up all the corpses, and bring them back to the Dragon Tomb. After that, I followed Alliance Leader to Nebula Ridge and invited Lu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Chanhe faction, and other disciples related to Senior Zhang. What about Alliance Leader? Ji Yen Jinren asked with a frown. When I returned through the Continent Teleportation Bridge, Alliance Leader didn't say anything, so I don't know. The disciple hurriedly replied, In addition, I also gave Alliance Leader the cultivation technique Jade Slip that Senior Zhang modified for the Chanhe faction. Okay, you can leave now. Let Lu Hanhuan and his subordinates in. Ji Yen Jinren waved his hand and ordered. The disciple bowed and disappeared. After a few seconds, Lu Hanhuan appeared on a leaf with Yu Shuahong, Gao Cheng, Xiafeng, Yun Songyu, Hong Feng, and Zhang Ji. Lu Hanhuan and the others couldn't compare to Huang Su. As soon as they entered, their faces turned pale and panicked. They looked left and right, and before they could see clearly, they saluted in panic, Junior Lu Hanhuan and the others greet Alliance Master. Wait, don't be nervous. Ji Yen Jinren said with a smile, You are now the great heroes of the Taoist Alliance. Speaking of which, I'm the one who should be saluting to you. If it weren't for you, how could the Taoist Alliance obtain the spiritual root selection method? If it weren't for the spiritual root selection method, how could the Taoist Alliance select suitable disciples in the future? Hearing Ji Yen Jinren's words, Lu Hanhuan finally felt relieved. He knew that no matter what happened in the future, he would not have to worry about the Chanhe faction being destroyed by other factions. Therefore, Lu Hanhuan hastily bowed again and said, Since Junior and Junior's Chanhe faction are part of the Taoist Alliance, we should do our best for the Taoist Alliance. What Junior did was what I should do, and I don't deserve Senior's thanks. Moreover, it was Senior Zhang who gave all of this to my Chanhe faction. If Senior wants to thank me, you can go and find Senior Zhang. I'm not surprised by your favor. I don't deserve it. Sect Leader Lu, you're really good. Ji Yen Jinren smiled and said, Chu Pu Immortal Alliance Leader, how can such a strong cultivator not be a member of the Immortal Alliance? Shocked, Wen Jia hastily stood up and said with fear, It's all Junior's fault. After the Alliance Conference, Junior will definitely invite Sect Leader Lu to join my Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. Ji Yen Jinren nodded slightly and said to Lu Hanhuan, Sect Leader Lu, can you tell me about your encounter with fellow Daoist Zhang Xiaohua? Alliance Leader. Lu Hanhuan hastily called out, You're already praising me by calling me Hanhuan. Please don't call me Sect Leader Lu anymore. Okay. Hanhuan, tell me what happened in the past month slowly. Ji Yen Jinren smiled. Lu Hanhuan cleared his throat and was about to speak. Rumble. A series of thunderclaps came from the distance. When the thunderclaps got closer, the void began to show folds and black and white lines collapsed into the void. Woo! A strange whistling sound suddenly rang out and the collapsing void shrank rapidly. Then, with a flash of red light, old man Gu Qiong's nascent soul flew out of the collapsing void like a stream of light. An aura as vast as before surged in all directions like a tide. Whoosh! As soon as the nascent soul appeared, old man Gu Qiong's body glowed with a dazzling brilliance and the nascent soul flew into it faster than a swallow returning to its nest. When old man Gu Qiong's nascent soul fused with his body, the lightning flashed and chased after him. It flickered for a moment before disappearing along with his aura. Lu Hanhuan waited tactfully while Ji Yanjunren stared at old man Gu Qiong without blinking. Old man Gu Qiong opened his eyes and nodded at him before closing his eyes to meditate. Ji Yanjunren then looked up at Lu Hanhuan and said, "Hanhuan, Alliance leader is back. You can speak now." "Yes." Lu Hanhuan agreed and told Ji Yanjunren about how Noa Yeqing discovered the heavenly cycle demon subduing star formation, how Lu Qingyu failed to break it, how he invited Hong Feng, Yu Hua, and Zhang Ji to go with him, and how he discovered Xiao Hua. Finally, Lu Hanhuan said, "In order to thank Senior Zhang, I agreed to let Noa Yeqing's master, Lu Qingyu, and Yu Hua come with me." Of course, Lu Qingyu and Yu Hua seemed to have told Senior Zhang about this before, but Senior Zhang didn't agree at that time. After that, Lu Qingyu found Gao Cheng and asked me to mention it in front of Senior Zhang. I thought that it was a good thing to help them, so I agreed. Who knew that Senior Zhang didn't refuse? So, Senior Zhang left Chan He sect with the three of them 10 days before Alliance Master came to Nebula Ridge. Then, "Hanhuan, do you know where fellow Taoist Zhang went?" Ji Yanjunren thought for a moment and asked with a trace of regret and a trace of hope in his eyes. Chapter 48-89. Lu Hanhuan was a little hesitant. When he was reporting, he had only described Xiao Hua's deeds in the Chan He sect in detail. In fact, he hadn't revealed anything about Xiao Hua. Now that he heard Ji Yan's question, he said, "Alliance Master, I don't know where Senior Zhang went. However, when Senior Zhang was in Xingyan Ridge, he asked me about the location of the Woman Mountain Range. Moreover, after Elder Yu Zhuohong returned from the Grand Pavilion Mountain Auction, he gave Senior Zhang a jade slip that recorded the transmission route from the Fengyan Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance." Master Ji Yan raised his eyebrows and asked faintly, "Hanhuan, let's not talk about fellow Zhang's whereabouts for now. Let me ask you, what do you think of the spiritual root selection method?" Seeing that Master Ji Yan didn't ask about Xiao Hua's whereabouts, Lu Hanhuan was relieved and said respectfully, "My cultivation is shallow, so I don't dare to say too much about the subtleties of the cultivation method. However, as the sect master, I think that the spiritual root selection method can completely replace the spiritual root selection method before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. Moreover, the spiritual root selection method seems to be more reliable than the previous method of determining physique and bone structure. The disciple that my Chan He sect chose was originally a backup plan to deal with the Flying Shadow sect's encirclement. However, the Flying Shadow sect was destroyed by Senior Zhang, so I ordered the Yulan Palace to teach these disciples the most basic chi refining method. As far as I know, 99% of the selected disciples can easily draw chi into their bodies, which is more than before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. However, because of my hesitation, Senior Zhang just gave me his modified cultivation method, so I didn't let the disciples teach these cultivation methods to the new disciples." Master Ji Yan looked at Elder Gu Qiong, who was meditating with his eyes closed. He didn't know if Elder Gu Qiong was comprehending the modified cultivation method or adjusting his breath. He then asked Lu Hanhuan, "Hanhuan, have you seen these modified cultivation methods? What do you think of these cultivation methods?" This. When Lu Hanhuan heard that, a bitter smile appeared on his face. He said embarrassedly, reporting to Lord Alliance Leader, "My Chan He sect has not been passed down for a long time, and I have little talent and knowledge. Although these cultivation techniques are modified according to my Chanhe sect's cultivation techniques, after I read them, although I can understand what has been changed, I still know what it is but not what it is. Furthermore, I haven't had the time to let my disciples practice these techniques. It's really hard for you to ask all these questions. Never mind. Hanhuan, your Chanhe school has made a great contribution. After the conference, a disciple will give you my token. If anything happens to your Chanhe school in the future, you can directly report to me. Reverend Ji Yen said with a smile. Lu Hanhuan was overjoyed and bowed to express his gratitude. Ji Yen Jinren looks at the disciple behind Ji Yen Jinren and asks with a pleasant expression, which one is Hong Feng and which one is Zhang Ji? Hong Feng and Zhang Ji hurriedly bowed again and said, Junior greets Lord Alliance Leader. Tell me in detail how you met fellow Zhang. Ji Yen Jinren doesn't want to let go of any details and asks again. Hong Feng and Zhang Ji didn't dare to be negligent. They recounted their encounter with Xiao Hua in the Xie mountain range. Zhang Ji even looked at Hong Feng, then at Lu Hanhuan, and said with a smile, Good, Lord Alliance Chief, this junior feels that Senior Zhang is a little strange. Oh, what strange? Ji Yen Jinren asks with interest. Zhang Ji hurriedly says, First, if Senior Zhang has been in seclusion for hundreds of years and has just come out, why is he naked? Even if his clothes are rotten, he must have prepared something in his universal bracelet. Junior didn't see Senior Zhang's storage bracelet. You're right. What's the second thing? Ji Yen Jinren says with a smile. Secondly, I feel that Senior Zhang, if his cultivation base isn't as profound as ours, then he must have lost all of his magical power and is currently recovering. As he spoke, Zhang Ji stole a glance at Lu Hanhuan. Sure enough, a trace of anger appears on Lu Hanhuan's face, but it disappears in a flash. At the same time, Hong Feng glares at Zhang Ji. Ji Yen Jinren waves his hand and says, Zhang Ji, you think too much. Junior doesn't think too much. Zhang Ji still says, if he still has his spiritual power, how could he only use his whistling to fight the enemy, Lord Alliance Leader? Gao Qing seems to think of something and hurriedly says, Junior has something important to report. Ji Yen Jinren seems to have other plans and doesn't want Zhang Ji to say that Xiao Hua has lost all his spiritual power. Now that Gao Qing speaks, he immediately points at him and asks, What's your name? What's so important? Junior is Gao Qing of the Chanhe sect. Gao Qing hurriedly replies, Although I haven't met Senior Zhang much, I know that. Senior Zhang is definitely a senior expert, not a weak one like Zhang Ji said. Oh. Ji Yen Jinren laughs and asks, Gao Qing, why do you say that? Senior. Gao Qing replied, when Lu Qingyu begged me to put in a good word for you in front of the sect leader, he inadvertently revealed that Senior Zhang's Dharma power was boundless, and his vision was even more powerful. When Senior Zhang chatted with the Heavenly Alliance, he told them the reason for the change of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and the reason for the aging of cultivators. What? Ji Yen Jinren is shocked and asks incredulously, Did he say what the reason is? Yes. Gao Qing is overjoyed and hurriedly says, it seems to be about the physical body and bloodline. 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 Ji Yen Jinren's eyes lit up as if he had understood something. He nodded and said, Gao Qing, you're right. Is there anything else? Gao Qing certainly wouldn't let go of this opportunity and told him what he knew. When Gao Qing finished, Yu Zhuohong hurriedly says, Lord Alliance Leader, I also have something to report. At this moment, old man Gu Qiong opened his eyes and said, Don't worry, yes. Yu Zhuohong didn't dare to say more. He just stood there. Lord Alliance Leader. Ji Yen Jinren asked worriedly, How is it? Alas, it's okay. Old man Gu Qiong sighed and got up. If it was before, it would be nothing. Even now, it's just consuming some of my lifespan. Then, Lord Alliance leader is. Ji Yanjinren asked tentatively, comprehending those modified cultivation techniques. Yes. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and opened his mouth again. Woo! A fiery red light spurts out, and several jade slips fell into the air. Old man Gu Qiong pointed at the jade slips and said, Ji Yan, these are the spiritual root cultivation techniques that fellow Taoist Zhang created for the disciples of the Chanhe sect. I've taken a look at them and found that they are very complete. In addition to the 5 elements spiritual roots, there are also several other mutated spiritual roots. These cultivation techniques not only involve qi refinement but also foundation establishment. The cultivation techniques of the disciples of the Chanhe sect are very common in the Tao Alliance, and the disciples of other sects can also cultivate these cultivation techniques. Therefore, make copies of these cultivation techniques and the spiritual root selection technique. After the Alliance meeting, give them to every sect in the Tao Alliance and ask them to cultivate them. Ji Yanjinren suppressed his surprise and took the jade slips. After making a copy, he ordered the disciples standing outside the Alliance meeting to make copies and distribute them. The Yi clan's patriarch bit his lip. After Ji Yanjinren gave the order, he said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Ji Yan, let me take a look first. However, before the Yi clan's patriarch could finish his sentence, woo woo. Sounds suddenly came from all over the tree of the Alliance. Then, the sound of wind instruments came from the void. A wave of heaven and earth's will inexplicably enveloped the entire space. This. Not only was the Yi clan's patriarch dumbfounded, but even old man Gu Qiong and Ji Yanjinren were baffled. No one could move, think, or release their spiritual force. All they could see was the roots, trunk, branches, and leaves of the Alliance tree emitting 9 colored lights that fluttered in the void like fireflies. As the wind instruments became clearer, the 9 colored lights gradually gathered together to form a huge and majestic human figure. Old man Gu Qiong could not help but exclaim in his heart, Tao. Tao Master. Of course, the moment old man Gu Qiong recognized the human figure, a gentle voice rang in everyone's ears, kindness. Tao Master disappeared as soon as the word, kindness, appeared, and the Alliance meeting returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Old man Gu Qiong and the others were still baffled. Ji Yanjinren looked down at his hands and asked in confusion, Senior Gu Qiong, what happened just now? Nothing happened. Tao Master's departure seemed to have erased the previous abnormality. Gu Qiong asked in confusion, nothing happened. Didn't the Yi clan's patriarch ask you for a cultivation technique? Oh. Ji Yanjinren waved his hand with a smile and handed one of the jade slips to the Yi clan's patriarch. Fellow Taoist, why are you in such a hurry? Everyone will get a copy after the Alliance meeting. I can't wait to see what's so great about this cultivation technique that even Senior Gu Qiong admires. The Yi clan's patriarch said with a smile as he took the jade slip and read it carefully with his spiritual force. Old man Gu Qiong looked around and said, Ji Yan, leave the little girl from the Chanhe sect here. The 81 disciples of the Immortal Alliance will leave the Alliance meeting for now. Set up a transmission line outside the Alliance meeting and pass the spiritual root selection and spiritual root cultivation techniques to the members of the Alliance meeting from the Dragon's Tomb so that they can comprehend them immediately. Chapter 4890. Yes. Ji Yan nodded and gave the order. Soon, all the branches and branches of the Alliance tree were gone, leaving only a leaf floating on the bare trunk where Yuzhuahong was. Yuzhuahong. Gu Qiong asked, what do you want to say? I gave Senior Zhang a jade slip that day. Yuzhuahong bit his lips and said, it recorded the teleportation array from the Fengyan Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance. I have another one in my storage ring. Okay. Gu Qiong nodded and said, we all know about this, so you don't have to tell anyone else. This is very important, so give me the jade slip. Oh, what do you want as a reward? I want to join a famous sect to cultivate. Yu Shuhong answered without hesitation. Obviously, he already had a plan in mind. Okay. Ji Yan had a bad temper, but he was a resolute person. He replied immediately, as you wish. Where are the disciples of the Chongxi faction? Disciple is. A low voice came from the tree trunk. Pass my order. Yu Shuhong is to leave the Chanhe faction and join the Chongxi faction. Ji Yan ordered, I'll leave this matter to you. Find a suitable master for Yu Shuhong. Yes, master. The disciple agreed and left in a flash of light. Thank you, sect master. Yu Shuhong cried tears of joy and kowtowed to express his gratitude. He, get up. Ji Yan said with a smile, I'm not the Chongxi faction master, someone else is the sect master. However, the sect master won't disobey my order. You should withdraw from the alliance now. Oh, remember, carve Zhang Xiaohua's appearance into a jade slip, then give the jade slip to the alliance's disciples. Say that it's this old man's order, and have them immediately send it to Jing Longling. Then, say goodbye to the Chanhe faction master and go to the Chongxi faction. Yes, I understand. Yu Shuhong didn't dare to delay and left the alliance conference immediately. Seeing that the space had cleared up, Ji Yan Zhenren looked to his left and raised his finger. Whoosh! Dark green light rose up layer by layer, covering the treetop. Senior Gu Qiong, did you find anything? Ji Yan asked after he had used his spiritual force to check it out. Old man Gu Qiong did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the Yi clan patriarch solemnly and asked, Yi Zhen, what do you think of this qi refinement technique? Yi Zhen withdrew his divine sense from the jade slip and handed it to the tribulation transcending cultivator next to him. Without any hesitation, he said, when I first looked at the modification of the cultivation method, I felt that it was ordinary, but the deeper I looked, the more frightened I became. The modification of the cultivation method is like playing Go. The previous few moves were very simple, and I couldn't see any clues. Step by step, all the chess pieces were placed down, and the whole game was over. Only then did I realize that the whole game was flawless. Every move before had great meaning, and every move was a perfect combination with the chess pieces before and after. Not bad. Old man Gu Qiong nodded and said, when I came back, I started to comprehend this cultivation method. Just like what the elder ancestor of the Yi clan said, I didn't pay too much attention to it at the beginning. However, when I returned to the Alliance conference and calmed down to carefully comprehend it, I realized that, although this cultivation method looks simple, it actually opens up a new path and is a perfect match for the spirit root selection technique. Hiss. Ji Yan gasped when he heard Old Man Gu Qiong and Old Man Gu Qiong's words. He had never seen Old Man Gu Qiong praise someone like that before, and he had never seen the arrogant Yi clan patriarch praise someone like that. What a pity. Old Man Gu Qiong sighed and changed his tone. I thought that Zhang Xiaohua was an itinerant cultivator of the Tao Alliance, but in fact, he might be a high-level cultivator of the Heaven Alliance. Ah! The Heaven Alliance? Ji Yan asked in surprise, Alliance Master, what's going on? Ji Yan, didn't you say that during the Alliance conference? The Heaven Alliance suddenly sent a lot of people to infiltrate our Tao Alliance in the past 10 years. You've been wondering why they did that, but I'll tell you that it's most likely because of Zhang Xiaohua. Old Man Gu Qiong explained with a trace of regret on his face, after I killed the cultivators of the Heaven Alliance, I went to the western wild mountain range, where Zhang Xiaohua first appeared. Guess what I found there? It was rare for Old Man Gu Qiong to keep them in suspense. Unfortunately, everyone was busy reading the jade slip, and immortal Ji Yan was eager to know the truth, so he didn't answer. Only Yi Zhen pondered for a while and asked, Senior, did you find the continent teleportation bridge? What shocked me more than the continental teleportation bridge? Old Man Gu Qiong narrowed his eyes and said, it's the aura of the realm passage. Hiss. Old man Gu Qiong's words startled the cultivators who were copying the jade slips and searching for the cultivation method. They looked up at old man Gu Qiong in surprise. Senior, didn't you say that you were looking for the realm passage? The Yi family patriarch's breathing quickened as he hurriedly asked, did you find it in the western wild mountain range? No. Old man Gu Qiong shook his head and said, I came back late because I used my primordial spirit projection to look for traces of the realm passage in the western wild mountain range. However, the space within 5,000 kilometers of the western wild mountain range was closed. Except for some chaotic realm laws, there was no trace of the passage. In other words, Zhang Xiaohua didn't come out of seclusion but came back from another realm. She came to the western wild mountain range of our Dao Alliance by accident and didn't return to the territory of the Heaven Alliance. Ji Yan asked. Of course. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, didn't you hear what Zhang Jitsing said? When Zhang Xiaohua appeared, she was naked, so her clothes must have been torn by the realm passage. Needless to say, her storage ring might have been destroyed during the realm passage. Most importantly, Zhang Xiaohua mentioned the Defeat You Immortal Alliance. Do you remember it? Isn't the Defeat You Immortal Alliance one of the 72 immortal alliances of the Heaven Alliance? Is it near the Wuming Mountain Range on the southeast edge of the Yilan continent? Yes, that's right. Ji Yan's spiritual master nodded. Later, when Zhang Xiaohua found out this was the Dao Alliance, not the Heaven Alliance, she immediately changed her words and said she was going to the Wuming Mountain Range. If she went to the Wuming Mountain Range from the Dao Alliance, she would have to go to the Heaven Alliance, right? The patriarch of the Yi family pondered for a moment and nodded. Yes, didn't Gao Qing say that? When Zhang Xiaohua talked about the reason for the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the passing of one's lifespan, he mentioned the body and bloodline. As far as I know, some immortal alliances in the Heavenly Alliance near the Wuming Mountain Range are affected by the witchcraft of the Wuming Mountain Range. The Heavenly Alliance's Taoist techniques contain the power of bloodline. I didn't realize it before, but now that you mentioned it, I realize that there are traces of witchcraft in the spiritual root selection method. In this modified cultivation method, 30% of the bloodline technique, 20% of the physical body tempering technique, and 50% of the real Taoist skill. This is the characteristic of the Heaven Alliance's Taoist skill. Yi Zhen, you underestimated Zhang Xiaohua. Elder Gu Qiong said meaningfully, of the 50% Taoist skill, 30% is the essence spirit cultivation technique of the Heaven Alliance, and 40% is the real Taoist skill. Wow! Even Ji Yan spiritual master and the others were shocked. Ji Yan spiritual master even cried out, Alliance master, how could this Qi refinement cultivation technique contain so many mysteries? What do you think? Elder Gu Qiong asked, if this Qi refinement cultivation technique wasn't so wonderful, how could I let all the disciples of the Dao Alliance cultivate it? Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Ji Yan spiritual master shook his head in disbelief, clearly unable to understand. Ordinary cultivators might not understand the source of the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but how could we not know? Elder Gu Qiong continued, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth must have rushed into the Yilan continent and caused chaos. Of course, finding a space channel to go to another world is the solution. Since the Dao Alliance thought of it, the Heaven Alliance naturally thought of it as well. Zhang Xiaohua should be the cultivator at the Heaven Alliance sent to another world to find a passage. Fairy Mo Yun came to a realization. She looked at the jade slip in her hand and said loudly, Alliance Master, since he's a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance, why did he leave the spiritual root selection method and the spiritual root cultivation technique to our Dao Alliance's Chanhe sect? It's simple. If you met an ordinary sect in the Heaven Alliance, would you be stingy with some cultivation techniques? Elder Gu Qiong asked with a smile. Of course I wouldn't be stingy with ordinary cultivation techniques. Fairy Mo Yun replied, but this cultivation technique is obviously different. If you've already found the passageway to other realms, the Heavenly Alliance will soon eliminate the influence of the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in other ways. Will you still care about these cultivation methods under the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? Elder Gu Qiong replied, moreover, you have foundation establishment, gold core, and even nascent soul cultivation techniques. No. No. Fairy Mo Yun shook her head slightly. So. Elder Gu Qiong said firmly, I might have doubted it before, but from this cultivation technique, I'm sure that Zhang Xiaohua must have found the passage to another world. An. Ji Yan Jinren immediately said, the 10,000 disciples of the Heaven Alliance who went to the Chanhe sect didn't come for the Chanhe sect, but for the Westfield Mountain Range. Huh, you're right. Elder Gu Qiong clapped his hands and said, I didn't realize it before I arrived at the Westfield Mountain Range. Unfortunately, it was too late. I'll leave this matter to you. See if you can find out anything from the remaining disciples of the Heaven Alliance. Chapter 4891. Why do you care about those low-level disciples? The patriarch of the Yi family said with a smile, didn't Zhang Ji say that? Zhang Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, which is exactly the result of passing through the realm channel. Zhang Xiaohua is heading to the Heavenly Alliance according to the teleportation route given by Yu Zhuhong of the Chanhe sect. He doesn't know that his identity and whereabouts have been exposed. We just need to take the teleportation route and rush to the teleportation array to intercept Zhang Xiaohua. He. Ji Yan spiritual master said with a smile, that's why I asked the other disciples of the Tao Alliance to leave the alliance meeting. Then, Ji Yan spiritual master raised his voice and asked, disciples of the Tao Alliance, have you sent any jade slips from Night Wind Valley? Vice Alliance leader, the teleportation route on the continent has been set up. Please wait for 15 minutes. A respectful voice came from the tree trunk. Okay. Ji Yan spiritual master replied and looked around. Although Zhang Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, he is at least an early-stage crossing tribulation cultivator, so we can't neglect him. I'm going to issue an Earth-level alliance token and secretly order the sects guarding the teleportation arrays to pay close attention to the teleportation arrays recorded in the jade slips and even the teleportation arrays around them. If they find any trace of Zhang Xiaohua, they must report it to the Tao Alliance immediately. We're going to work in pairs and take charge of different areas. When the message is sent out, the fellow Taoists on the left should head there immediately. Okay. All the crossing tribulation cultivators agreed. Before long, the disciples of the Tao Alliance delivered the jade slips. Ji Yan spiritual master made dozens of copies and distributed the teleportation routes to the disciples. Then, he assigned the disciples according to the routes. In the end, Taoist Ji Yan looked at the crowd and solemnly said, this matter is very important. If we capture Zhang Xiaohua, our Tao Alliance will be able to obtain information about the realm passageway. At the very least, we'll be able to obtain more cultivation techniques for our disciples. Therefore, this humble Taoist begs all of you. You must keep Zhang Xiaohua in the Tao Alliance. What if we can't? A crossing tribulation cultivator couldn't help but ask. I don't think so. Old man Gu Qiong said with a smile, Zhang Xiaohua has just passed through the realm channel, and he has lost all his spiritual power. How can he be your match? If you find it, you will definitely be able to capture it. This junior is asking what if. That cultivator seemed to want to get to the bottom of the matter, which crossing tribulation cultivator doesn't have a secret technique to escape. At the critical moment, how should this junior deal with it? Kill. Taoist Ji Yan said without hesitation, if the Tao Alliance can't get it, then neither can the Heaven Alliance. Old man Gu Qiong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Ji Yan. He shook his head slightly as if he was looking at his willful nephew and said with a smile, Ji Yan, you should wait until you become the leader of the Tao Alliance. You have to understand that although Zhang Xiaohua is a cultivator of the Heavenly Alliance, she is still a member of the Tao sect. He carries the heavy responsibility of the Heaven Alliance and knows the secrets of the realm passageway. Not only is he extremely important to the Heaven Alliance, he's also extremely important to our Tao Alliance. Even if we can't capture him, we can't kill him. If the Heaven Alliance was able to escape using the realm passageway, how could the Tao Alliance, which has so many spies in the Heaven Alliance, not have received the news? Our Tao Alliance will be able to benefit from this as well. Everyone, listen to my orders as the leader. Yes. It was rare for the cultivators to see old man Gu Qiong so solemn, so they hurriedly bowed and said, according to our previous discussion, if you see Zhang Xiaohua, immediately capture her. If she desperately tries to escape, you can only chase after her. Don't kill her. Yes. The cultivators replied in unison. After old man Gu Qiong gave his orders, Daoist Ji Yan waved his hand and removed the restriction. Then, he ordered the 81 cultivators of the Immortal Alliance to come in and announce the end of the Alliance Conference. After the end of the Alliance Conference, the 81 tree branches turned into streams of light and escaped into the void. Daoist Ji Yan raised his hand and took out a jade rui. Then, he activated his magic power and gently tapped it on the tree trunk. Boom, boom, boom. Loud rumbling sounds resounded. The space around the treetop collapsed. The entire treetop rotated and shrank into the trunk. The entire trunk shook violently as it slowly fell into the space below. The tree trunk broke free from the space and turned into a huge jade pillar. It really did fall into a huge hall. As soon as the jade pillar fell into the hall, it emitted colorful lights and transformed into 365 jade pillars that were more than 30 meters tall. After a while, the lights dimmed and the jade pillars stopped in the center of the hall. Then, old man Gu Qiong, Daoist Ji Yan, and the others floated down from their respective jade pillars. After coming out of the hall, the cultivators cupped their hands and bade farewell. Naturally, the disciples of the Tao Alliance came to see them off. After most of the cultivators left, Daoist Ji Yan thought for a while and said, Ye family patriarch, Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, Feriamo Yun, follow me and Senior Gu Qiong to guard the last few teleportation arrays of the Tao Alliance. If there are no accidents, the Heaven Alliance will definitely send people to the sacrificial abyss and even break into the territory of the Tao Alliance to welcome Zhang Xiaohua. In order to be absolutely safe, let's discuss it again. Yi family patriarch was stunned and looked at Fu Bo. They exchanged a look and said with a smile, in that case, we'll follow Daoist Ji Yan's arrangement. This way please. Daoist Ji Yan nodded slightly and raised his hand. Then, he led them through several palaces and into a very quiet hall. There were no special decorations in this hall except for some jade chairs and several jade pillars with coiling dragons, which looked very grand. Daoist Ji Yan and Daoist Ji Yan sat down and sat in front of Daoist Ji Yan. Daoist Ji Yan and the others walked to the front of the jade chairs, and Elder Gu Qiong sat down. Daoist Ji Yan and the others sat down according to the host and the guests. After they sat down, a disciple served them spiritual fruits and spiritual tea. Fairy Mo Yun took a sip of the spiritual tea and looked at Daoist Ji Yan with a smile, saying, Daoist Ji Yan, Zhang Xiaohua is now rushing to the Heaven Alliance through the teleportation array. The other Taoists have been ordered to chase after her. Although our mission is behind, this place is very far from the sacrificial abyss. I'm afraid we can't delay, right? Hee hee. Yu Hongzi smiled and put the spirit fruit in his mouth. After taking a bite, he said, Fellow Daoist Jiyan, you didn't ask us to stay because of Zhang Xiaohua, right? Daoist Ji Yan glanced at them with a smile and said nothing. Finally, he looked at Elder Gu Qiong and said, Senior Gu Qiong, you just used the nascent soul projection technique. Did you lose a lot of your lifespan? Elder Gu Qiong nodded and replied, yes. I didn't expect that using the nascent soul projection technique would consume so much of my lifespan. Alas. If that's the case. The Yi family's patriarch hurriedly advised, Senior Gu Qiong, please don't do anything in the future. We're here for you. You'll also consume your lifespan if you do anything. Elder Gu Qiong shook his head and looked at the palace gate in front of him. He sighed and said, the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is too terrifying. Zhang Xiaohua is too important. If the Tao Alliance really goes to other realms in the future, today's alliance meeting will be a milestone that will be engraved in the annals of history. Daoist Ji Yan smiled and said, everything about Zhang Xiaohua is still just a guess. We can't relax until we capture her and get concrete information about the realm's passageways. However, I have asked you to stay because I have something to discuss with you about making up for your lifespan. Oh. Making up for my lifespan? Is there such a good thing? Elder Gu Qiong said in surprise, why do I feel like a piece of meat pie has fallen from the sky? Senior, I asked you to attend the alliance meeting because it's very important, and we need you to be the abbot. On the other hand, I want to ask you, the number one expert of the Tao Alliance, to fight against the number one expert of the Heaven Alliance. Daoist Ji Yan replied. Elder Gu Qiong frowned and asked curiously, could it be that Long Shensi is also thinking about making a move? Daoist Ji Yan nodded and looked away from Elder Gu Qiong to the Yi family's patriarch. Then, he glanced at Wanderer Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, and Fairy Mo Yun before he said, that's right. I received a very reliable piece of news. Not only will Long Shensi make a move, but Kong Chang, Yang Xia, Sage Jean, and Earth Spirit's Holy Mother, will also make a move. That's why I asked you to stay. It'll be best if we can stop Zhang Xiaohua at the teleportation array. If we can't, it's fine. Whether we can stop her or not, we must cross the heaven sacrificial abyss and head to that place. The Tao Alliance, one of the two major forces of the Yi Lin continent, regarded Xiaohua as an enemy of the Heaven Alliance and issued an Earth Alliance token to stop him at the teleportation array. However, the Tao Alliance's Alliance Master, Old Man Gu Qiong, Vice Alliance Master Ji Yan, and even the 81 Alliance Masters of the Tao Alliance seem to have made an extremely childish mistake. They had thought that Xiaohua would lead the three Chan He sect disciples to the first teleportation formation marked on Zhuahong's jade slip. However, they neglected the fact that Xiaohua didn't have any crystals. Even if he wanted to enter the teleportation array, he couldn't. They didn't do it on purpose. In their eyes, crystals weren't a problem at all. However, crystals were still a very serious problem in the eyes of Xiaohua, a great saint of the human race. Xiaohua had already arrived at the Xiahong Mountain Auction Hall. Faced with a dazzling array of items, Xiaohua had no other choice but to covet them. The Xiahong Mountain Auction Hall was the closest auction hall to the Chan He sect. Xiaohua thought that it was similar to the small auction hall he had seen in the Dawn Rain continent in his early years. However, when Yuehua steered the flying boat and led him to the auction hall between the two mountains, he was a little dumbfounded when he saw the real auction hall. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. In addition, I was supposed to rest today, but because of the Alliance Master of Basking in the Moonlight 5, I'll continue to update. Thank you for your support. There are no more chapters after 10 p.m. I'm done for today. Let's wait for tomorrow. Chapter 4892. It was a valley that was at least 100 miles long and several miles wide. The valley was not straight but curved like a huge earthworm. In addition to some tent-like things on the ground, there were all kinds of buildings on the mountain walls. These buildings were all built on protruding rocks. They looked like birds' nests, beehives, flowers, tree trunks, and there were even many caves that emitted all kinds of lights. Damn it, this is the Xiahong Mountain Auction House. Xiao Hua stood on the flying boat and looked at many Qi refinement and foundation establishment cultivators flying around in a hurry. He couldn't help but sigh, looks like, it's even bigger than the auction house in Jinghua City. However, after a moment, Xiao Hua laughed again, nonsense. Although the country of Xi's Imperial Thunder sect isn't the most famous of the three great sects, it's still ranked behind them and is considered one of the most powerful sects. The head of the Imperial Thunder sect is only at the late nascent soul stage. This Chanha sect in front of us, in the Fengyan country, isn't even, not even a fart. Its head is at the nascent soul stage. The strength of the Daoist sects in the Dawn Rain continent is much weaker than the Yilan continent. In the past, when others talked to me about the Defeat You Immortal Alliance, I only thought that the Defeat You Immortal Alliance was the entire Yilan continent. Now, it seems like the Defeat You Immortal Alliance is similar to the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. It's just that the Heaven Alliance is close to the millions of Meng Mountains, so the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent know about it. The cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't know that above this so-called Defeat You Immortal Alliance, there are two colossi, the Tao Alliance and the Heaven Alliance. I still don't know how big these two alliances are, but I think, it's something that the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't dare to imagine. If that's the case, it's normal for the Xie Hong Mountain auction house to be bigger than the auction house in Jinghua City. While Xiao Hua was thinking, Yu Hua had already stopped the flying boat in a valley and explained in a low voice, "Senior, the auction house doesn't allow flying boats to fly in directly. We'll have to keep the flying boat here and fly in directly." "Oh, which sect manages this Xie Hong Mountain auction?" Xiao Hua asked casually as he disembarked from the flying boat. "Senior," Lu Qingyu said with a smile, "small sects don't have the power to manage such an auction, and large sects don't care about it. Only some rogue cultivators are interested in it. This Xie Hong Mountain auction house is controlled by a rogue cultivator called Yuhong Mountain Man." "Loose cultivator?" Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback, then he smiled again. "Loose cultivators are also so powerful." "Of course." Yu Hua pursed her lips and said with a smile, "This senior named Yuhong is now a cultivator in the middle stage of the spirit severing stage. He is even more powerful than my sect leader. According to Elder Yuan, this senior is very good at scheming, and has a very good relationship with the nearby immortal cultivation sects and clans. Therefore, everyone is willing to come to this Xie Hong Mountain auction house to trade." "Clans?" Xiao Hua nodded. He thought for a moment and said, "In your Chanha sect's ancient records, there seems to be an immortal cultivation clan with the surname Huang. It is a relatively famous clan in Fengyan country. Is there any famous clan near this Xie Hong Mountain?" "Huang clan." Yu Hua's face was slightly red. She looked at Lu Qingyu and said, "Does junior brother Lu know?" Lu Qingyu shrugged and shook his head, "Don't ask me, I also don't know." "Golden core cultivators." Xiao Hua looked at the two golden core cultivators and unconsciously felt a burst of pain. If they were placed in Xiaoyu continent, they could be considered as people who could call the wind and summon the rain. But in Yilan continent, they were just like him who was only in the Qi refinement realm back then. Their eyes were covered in darkness and they actually didn't know anything. "Forget it." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "You all only know about Chu Pu Immortal Alliance and Tao Alliance. You don't know anything else. Just treat it as if this old man didn't ask anything." "Hee, it's good that senior knows." Nuo Yiqing said with a smile, "If senior wants to know about that immortal alliance or whatever, you can just go to the auction house and look for it." Xiao Hua followed Lu Qingyu into the valley and was welcomed by a huge memorial arch. This memorial arch looked a bit strange. It wasn't the usual square, but the kind of irregular pentagon. Two light yellow and light green pillars were inserted into the ground at an angle. Some strange patterns were engraved on the pillars. Streams of heaven and earth spiritual qi fell down like silk, passing through the pillars and falling to the ground. On the ground, there were two similar pentagon outlines. Layers of ripples appeared, and at first glance, it looked like water splashes. Oh. This is a simple transportation array. Xiao Hua's gaze fell, and he could already see something fishy. He couldn't help but be slightly startled. Then, he looked behind the memorial arch. Sure enough, there were 3 similar pentagon outlines, and they also had ripples of different colors. The 2 cultivators who had previously walked in front of Xiao Hua and the others looked left and right. They passed through the memorial arch and walked into the outlines. The 2 figures had just stood still when ripples gushed out like a fountain, covering the 2. Light and shadow flashed, and the 2 figures disappeared. The 2 cultivators' figures had just disappeared when that huge pentagon-shaped memorial arch immediately emitted a 5-colored brilliance. The brilliance gathered above the memorial arch, and the 6 large words, Xie Hong Mountain Auction House, appeared out of thin air. These 6 large words were majestic and extraordinary. This is the work of Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's Alliance Master Wen Jiuan. It looks like, it's nothing more than this. A very untimely voice floated along with the wind. Xiao Hua turned his head and saw that not more than 10 zhang away from him, a pretty female cultivator was whispering something to another man with delicate features. That female cultivator saw that Xiao Hua had seen it, and she fiercely glared at him. She used her hand to pull that man's sleeve and was about to pass through the memorial arch. Coincidentally, at this moment, woo-woo. A gust of wind blew, and those large words with golden hooks and iron characters turned into fireflies in the wind and slowly fell down. These fireflies fell near the 5 outlines, and unexpectedly turned into the phantoms of 5 graceful and outstanding women. Another cluster of fireflies fell directly below the memorial arch, and also turned into an elegant woman. That man was being pulled by the woman, and he walked hurriedly. He simply didn't care and rushed in front of the woman's phantoms. The man stared blankly. He wanted to stop, but when he saw that it was a phantom's, his figure simply flashed, wanting to pass through this phantom's. Ouch! Suddenly, a groaning sound came from the phantoms. The man was greatly alarmed and hastily stopped. Where his gaze fell, that phantoms actually rapidly solidified. A naked female cultivator was already standing in front of him, and those towering breasts almost collided with his body. Chapter 48-93. The man's face was burning and he quickly retreated. The woman pulling his sleeve didn't notice this. At this moment, she was looking up at a shop with a gourd hanging on the stone wall. The man wanted to pull his sleeve out of her hand as he retreated. The woman raised her hand like lightning and grabbed the man's wrist. She pulled him back and said, "You still want to run?" The man was originally retreating, but now he was pulled forward by the woman. He was caught off guard and collided with the woman who had just solidified. Ah! The woman's solidified figure let out a low cry and fell back as if she didn't have any magic power. The woman next to the man woke up and hurriedly raised her other hand to support the woman's waist. She cried out, "Oh, sorry, oh." Xiao Hua was originally looking at this farce, but when the woman stretched out her other hand, Xiao Hua was stunned. His gaze was attracted by a plum blossom mark on the woman's left wrist. This plum blossom mark looked very familiar. Xiao Hua felt like he had seen it somewhere before. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the woman had already steadied herself. Although her face was slightly red, she still bowed and said, "Welcome, fellow Taoists, to the Grand Spire Mountain Auction House. I'm the attendant of the Jingping Hall. I came out in a hurry and didn't notice you too. It's okay, it's okay." The man waved his hand shyly and said, "It's not your fault. I was in a hurry and offended you." The attendant pursed his lips and said with a smile, "I wonder what the 2 of you are here to buy at Xie Hong Mountain. My Jingping Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If the 2 of you don't mind, I'm willing to introduce." The man was caught off guard and said with a smile, "We're here to, Wen Qing." Before the man finished speaking, the woman next to him shouted and interrupted him. She then said to the woman, "In that case, please lead the way. We'll go take a look, that's great. Please." The woman was very happy and stepped to the side to make some space. The man named Wen Qing and the woman next to him walked into the outline. The light waves on the ground went against the flow and wrapped around the three of them. They disappeared in a moment. What surprised Xiao Hua was that the woman next to the man seemed to have noticed his gaze. Even before they were teleported, she still glared at him from the light waves. "Is it necessary?" Xiao Hua curled his lips slightly. "She's just a little girl who just stepped into the Golden Core realm. It's just." Xiao Hua curled his lips and then pinched his chin and thought, "Where have I seen that plum blossom mark? Is it in the 3 continents or the Dawn continent? Wen Qing. Wen. Is it related to the surname Wen mentioned?" While he was thinking, a rather sweet voice sounded from not far away, "Greetings, seniors. Welcome to my Xie Hong mountain. What are you looking for in the auction house?" "I'm the attendant of the Jingping Hall." The Jingping Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If you're willing, I can give them to you. Xiao Hua raised his eyes and looked over, only to see that within the pentagonal outline on the left side of the memorial arch, another beautiful woman leisurely walked out from within, and was looking at them with a smile. "No need." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "We'll walk around casually first." Lu Qingyu, who was at the side, said in a low voice, "Senior, I heard from Elder Yu that this Jingping Hall is a fair place. Moreover, because there are people from Yuhong Mountain, very few people will cause trouble here. Therefore, she usually trades in the Jingping Hall." "Yes, I know." Xiao Hua nodded and didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he passed through the archway and entered the valley. After passing through the archway, it was the auction house that Xiao Hua saw in the sky earlier. In the rather spacious valley, there were already many cultivators who were either stopping, strolling, or flying up and down. It looked very lively. When this lively scene fell into Xiao Hua's eyes, a feeling of being separated for a long time spontaneously arose from the bottom of his heart. According to the time of the Dawn continent, it was only 600 to 700 years, but Xiao Hua had experienced more than a few hundred years. After being separated for tens of thousands of years, seeing the auction house of the Dao sect again, that kind of familiarity and that kind of atmosphere easily evoked the memories in Xiao Hua's heart. Huff. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to enter. Instead, he took a long breath and then exhaled. He greedily wanted to carve his homesickness into his soul. Faint sounds of bargaining and waves of faint magic power fluctuations attracted Xiao Hua's gaze everywhere. "Senior." A somewhat wooden and somewhat sonorous voice sounded from above Xiao Hua's head. "There are all kinds of puppets in this humble one's shop, which is a necessity for quiet cultivation and traveling. This humble one sees that Senior's magic power is profound and has remarkable abilities, so your vision must be extraordinary. Why don't you come to this humble one's shop to take a look? This humble one will definitely give Senior a discount." Xiao Hua raised his head and saw that on the rock wall that was more than 10 feet tall, there was a protrusion that was more than 10 feet in size. On top of it, there was a puppet that was several times the height of a person standing in midair. It waved at Xiao Hua, and its vividly painted face was piled up with a smile. "Let's go and take a look." Xiao Hua slightly smiled and said to Yu Hua and the others. He took the lead and walked towards the rock wall. "Senior." Yu Hua didn't dare to be negligent. She hurriedly flew to Xiao Hua's side and said somewhat awkwardly, "We don't have enough crystal stones. It's okay, this old man just wants to take a look." Xiao Hua's voice wasn't small. He didn't have any intention of hiding his intentions. He said with a smile, "I don't plan to buy anything." When Yu Hua heard this, her face became even redder. "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop. Xiao Hua's figure landed on the protrusion on the rock wall. The puppet immediately greeted him and said with a smile, "What kind of puppet does Senior need? What kind of puppets do you have in this shop? Can you introduce them to this old man?" Xiao Hua looked at the cave that was blocked by a restriction and asked. The puppet straightforwardly replied, reporting to Senior, "This humble one's shop has human puppets, beast puppets, and bird puppets. What kind does Senior need? Do you have soldier puppets?" Xiao Hua asked. Ga. The puppet stuttered a few times and said again, "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop. What kind of puppet does Senior need?" Chapter 4894. Hee, fellow Taoist, you must be joking. At this moment, light and shadow overflowed on the rock wall. A short but fat golden core cultivator hurriedly rushed out of the cave and cupped his hands towards Xiao Hua. "I'm Pang Tuojian, the owner of this shop. Greetings, fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua didn't reveal his cultivation at this time, and Yu Hua and Lu Qingyu behind him weren't golden core cultivators, so Pang Tuojian calling Xiao Hua, fellow Taoist, wasn't disrespectful. Xiao Hua smiled and returned the greeting. It's fine. This puppet is refined very well. It can be seen that fellow Taoist Pang is unique in refining puppets. You're too kind." Pang Tuojian's face showed a trace of pride, but his words were also humble. He raised his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, you seem to be an expert in refining puppets. How about we have a chat inside the shop?" I was just about to nag. Xiao Hua nodded and followed Pang Tuojian into the shop. After passing through the restriction on the rock wall, a space of several acres appeared in front of them. The four walls of the space were shining, illuminating the whole space. It looked no different from an ordinary shop. The space was divided into several areas. Some areas were filled with human-shaped, beast-shaped, and bird-shaped puppets. These puppets were neatly placed, and there were already many cultivators choosing them. Next to these areas were a few aura refining boys standing respectfully. There were also some damaged puppets in other areas, such as human-shaped arms or bird-shaped wings. The arrangement was a bit messy, and there were only one or two cultivators walking around casually. In the depths of the space, there was a place that occupied more than half of the space, where the materials used to refine puppets were piled up. There were even fewer cultivators there. Xiao Hua glanced around and didn't see any figures there. In an even smaller area, on the right side of the space, there were several shelves with some jade slips on them. They were presumably the methods to refine puppets. After looking at the layout of the shop, Xiao Hua walked towards the shelf on the right side of the space. The cultivator named Pang Tuojian was surprised and quickly followed behind Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Pang. Looking at the restriction on the shelf, he thought for a moment and asked, "Your shop actually has so many methods to refine puppets?" Hee. Hearing this, Pang Tuojian smiled and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, you are obviously an expert in refining. Most of the Taoist friends who came to Ai's shop would choose puppets directly, and the rest would look for the materials they needed. Only half of them would come to the jade slip that recorded the sacrificial refining method. Since fellow Taoist is also an expert, I won't hide it from fellow Taoist. There seem to be many jade slips here, but in fact, most of them are the same." Xiao Hua smiled and said with a nod, "Fellow Taoist Pang is an honest person. To be honest, I was also surprised to see so many jade slips. I didn't think that there would be so many sacrificial refining methods in a place like the Fengyan Kingdom." "Of course." Pang Tuojian smiled obsequiously. Xiahong Mountain is a small place after all, and the Fengyan Kingdom is not famous for its refining. I only copied it after seeing it in the Enlightenment Environment Alliance's Universe Auction. Oh. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he asked, "The Universe Auction Hall has so many puppet refinement methods?" "Of course." Pang Tuojian answered without hesitation. The Universe Auction Hall was opened by the disciple of the Enlightenment Alliance's Alliance Master, Qi Sanren. It mainly auctions for magic tools and magic treasures, and puppets are naturally one of them. Of course, there are countless sacrificial refining methods. Xiaohua's heart itched when he heard this, and he couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Pang, can you tell I what kind of sacrificial refining methods you've seen?" Oh. Hearing Xiaohua's words, Pang Tuojian raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiaohua from top to bottom. With a fake smile, he asked, "If fellow Taoist wants to buy my shop's sacrificial refining method, I can naturally introduce it to you. But if fellow Taoist wants to come to my shop to broaden your horizons, then forgive me for not accompanying you. Of course, fellow Taoist can view them in I's shop, and I definitely won't chase fellow Taoist away." "How dare you?" Lu Qingyu couldn't help but scold, "Pang Tuojian, how can you speak to Senior Zhang like that?" Senior Zhang. When Pang Tuojian heard this, he couldn't help but panic. However, he looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Since you're senior, then I'll tell you the truth. In my shop, as long as you have crystals, then you're my senior. If you don't have crystals and only want to look, then I won't accompany you even if you're senior. I'm doing business here according to the rules of the mountain people, so I'm not afraid of any senior causing trouble." After saying this, he turned around and walked away. Perhaps because Lu Qingyu called him senior, he didn't dare to offend Lu Qingyu too much. He even called a Qi refining boy over to accompany him. "Forget it." Xiaohua smiled faintly and stopped the boy who was refining Qi. Although he didn't know how many jade slips there were on the shelf in front of him, he knew that while the Dawn Rain continent was in dire shortage of jade slips for cultivation techniques, weapon refining techniques, alchemy techniques, and so on, the Yilin continent was filled with jade slips for cultivation techniques. This also caused the Yilin continent to have far more Taoist cultivators than the Dawn Rain continent, and the Taoist cultivators' realm and strength were also far higher than the Dawn Rain continents. Of course, he also understood that no matter how many cultivation techniques there were, human nature was always so real. "Damn it!" Yu Hua couldn't help but shout, "He's such a snob. Although we don't have many crystals, but..." But what?" Xiao Hua laughed and said, "Don't be fooled by him. He's not the only one bidding for cultivation techniques to refine puppets in this auction. If we want to buy them, we have to go to another shop." "That's right. Even if he's the only shop in this auction, we can still go to Qiyu auction." Nuo Yeqing said fiercely. "Ha ha ha. That's right. Let's go." Lu Qingyu also laughed loudly and followed Xiaohua out of the shop. After leaving the shop, Xiaohua smiled and said to Lu Qingyu, "Qingyu, it seems that without crystals, I can't even be a senior anymore. Let's hurry up and find a place to bid. Let's first sell some cultivation methods and get some crystal stones." "Senior, I'll let you know." Lu Qingyu, who had been standing on both sides of the valley, replied, "Senior, these shops on the stone wall are all for sale. The auction should still be in the valley." Previously, this junior specially asked Elder Yuan. "Other than selling cultivation techniques to Jing Pingtang, there's another way to sell them at the auction. As for when the auction will start, this junior doesn't know. If senior wants to know, this junior will go and find out. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip." Chapter 4895. Go quickly. Xiaohua nodded. Yes. Lu Qingyu agreed. Just as he was about to fly away, Yu Hua spoke again, "Junior Marshal Brother Lu, please wait a moment." "What's the matter, Senior Marshal Sister?" Lu Qingyu stopped and asked. Yu Hua said to Xiaohua, "Senior, Junior wants to go with Junior Marshal Brother Lu. When we find the place of the auction, Junior will first show the jade slips we prepared. If Senior is interested, why don't you let Yi Qin take you around the auction house of Xie Hong Mountain? Xiao Hua nodded. He raised his hand and pointed to the side of the valley and said, "Go ahead. This old man and Yi Qin will walk slowly along this valley. When you find something, come and find us." "Okay." Yu Hua said and gave a few messaging talismans to Nuo Yeqing. Then, she hurriedly flew into the valley with Lu Qingyu. Afterwards, Xiao Hua strolled around many shops with great interest. They either sold talismans, medicinal pills, magic tools, or materials. Just as Xiao Hua thought, in the shops that sold talismans, whether it was the materials used to make talismans or the method to refine talismans, they were all complete. There was no shortage or defect. All kinds of talisman brushes, talisman papers, talisman inks, fireball talismans, icicle talismans, and so on were placed on jade shelves or restrictions, allowing people to bid and buy at will. In the shops that sold medicinal pills, there were all kinds of spiritual grasses and spiritual fruits. Some of them were even unknown to Xiao Hua. Especially the pill recipes that Xiao Hua cared about, they were all complete and there was no defect. Just the medicinal pills that qi refining cultivators could take, there were over 100 kinds in one shop. In the shops that sold magic tools, all kinds of magic tools were placed in an orderly manner. There were also all kinds of refining materials. As for the refining method, just like what he saw before, all kinds of jade slips were also available for purchase. What made Xiao Hua sigh with emotion was that in a small shop, Xiao Hua also saw the complete cultivation methods of qi refining, foundation establishment, and Jin Dan. Moreover, the owner of the shop also promised that if Xiao Hua had enough crystal stones, he could provide the complete cultivation methods of yuanying divining. Coming out of the shop, Xiao Hua looked at the setting sun in the valley and could not help but sigh in his heart, this Yilan continent is indeed a paradise for Taoist cultivators. Not to mention some large city, even this tiny Xie Hong mountain auction ground is like heaven and earth when compared to Dawn Rain continent. When Xiao Hua first came to the auction house, on one hand, he wanted to obtain some crystal stones. On the other hand, he wanted to plunder some cultivation methods and pill recipes. But after looking around for so long, Xiao Hua discovered that this place was still desolate. Cultivation methods and pill recipes were still of a low level. He already had a lot of these things in his space, so there was nothing he wanted to buy. Not to mention that he didn't have too many crystal stones right now. Senior. At this time, Nuo Yeqing whispered, "Master has been gone for a long time and hasn't come back." Junior had sent a message earlier, but Master didn't come back. Could it be that something happened? Xiao Hua also felt a bit strange, but he smiled and said, "It should be fine. This old man has been observing all this time. The Xie Hong Mountain auction ground is for foundation establishment and aura refining cultivators. Aura's core disciples only account for 20%, and there are only a few nascent soul cultivators. Your master and the others are all in the Aura's core realm, so there shouldn't be any problems in this auction ground. Let's go, this old man also doesn't want to look anymore. We'll go look for them." "Yes, this junior has just inquired. The auction ground that Master mentioned just now is right in front of us." Nuo Yeqing said and pointed to a bright and resplendent place in the distance of the valley. The valley was not perfectly straight. When Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing turned a big corner, they discovered that there was a hill-like protrusion in that place. It bulged out from the stone wall, and there were many holes on it. Many cultivators were flying into these holes from various places. "Let's go, let's go." Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing had just flown close when they heard the extremely excited shouts of several young aura refining disciples above them. "If we're late, I'm afraid we won't be able to snatch it. My goodness, it's actually a cultivation method that relies on the mutated spiritual qi to cultivate. Just thinking about it makes me excited." Although these disciples had already flown past, their voices still floated into Xiao Hua's ears. Of course, I've been cultivating with my sex cultivation method for several years, but I haven't made any progress. I thought there was something wrong with my cultivation, but Master secretly told me that it wasn't my problem, it was the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. He, look. Xiaohua said with a slight smile, your master made a big move. Even if you sent 10 summoning talismans, I'm afraid he still wouldn't be able to get away. This is all due to Senior's merit. Nuo Yeqing said very respectfully. Merit? Xiaohua was slightly surprised and looked up and down at Nuo Yeqing. Nuo Yeqing hastily sped up and said, Senior, let's quickly go and help Master. N. Xiaohua smiled and didn't ask much. His figure streaked across the air and strode towards the light shadow. Without waiting for Xiaohua and Nuo Yeqing's figures to fall into the cave, they saw several chi-refining disciples excitedly flying out. As they flew, they whispered, we've made a fortune. Such a miraculous cultivation method is actually sold so cheaply. If I were to sell it, I wouldn't sell it for less than 10 top-grade crystals. What do you know? Another chi-refining disciple also happily said with a smile, this is called small profits but quick turnover. A chi-refining cultivation method that costs 10 top-grade crystals. Who would buy it? Do you think I can afford it? Senior brother. One of the female cultivators with ponytails blinked her big eyes and asked in a low voice, such a cheap cultivation method, could it be fake? Who would have such a good cultivation method and not keep it for themselves? Why would they take it here and casually sell it? Didn't they say it already? This cultivation method was modified by their grandmaster. They still have a lot of it. Because they know that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth has changed, many cultivators' cultivation methods are not suitable anymore. That's why they took it out to sell. Another disciple immediately explained, moreover, they also said that this cultivation method is easy to modify. If they don't sell it now, they won't be able to sell it in the future when all the sects and clans modify it. Fourth senior brother is right. Another disciple smiled and said, you may not know. This little brother went there early. Previously, when they were selling it, no one believed them at all. This little brother also took a look and didn't dare to buy it. But later, 2 nascent soul stage seniors suddenly came. These 2 nascent soul stage seniors seemed to be looking for something. They asked one stall after another. When they arrived in front of these 2 seniors, they didn't say anything and took out crystals to buy it. Moreover, after buying it, they immediately left. At that time, this little brother realized that these 2 seniors had already sold it here before. Therefore, these 2 nascent soul stage seniors came again to look for it. This little brother hurriedly sent a message to my fellow senior brothers. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote, vote for a recommendation vote, collect, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4896. Maybe those 2 nascent soul stage seniors were also acting. The female disciple still didn't dare to believe it. However, as they spoke, they gradually flew away. Xiaohua didn't know how the others would explain it. Xiaohua and Nuo Yeqing landed at the entrance of the cave. In front of them was a large hall, about 100 feet in size. The hall was transparent from top to bottom, left to right, and they could clearly see some figures moving about inside. At the end of the hall, there were several doors of the same size. In front of these doors, there were cultivators guarding them. Inside the hall, there were naturally cultivators flying in front of Xiaohua. They quickly walked through the doors, took out a crystal, and handed it to the cultivators guarding the door. Xiaohua understood that these guards should be the disciples of Yuhong Mountain. Xiaohua and Nuo Yeqing walked to the door. The guard asked politely, Seniors, do you want to sell something or buy something? Nuo Yeqing hurriedly asked, what about selling and buying? I'll let you know. The guard hurriedly replied, if you want to sell something, you'll have to pay a mid-grade crystal. Junior will give you a token, and you can find a stall inside. If you want to buy something, you'll only have to pay a mid-grade crystal. Nuo Yeqing looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Your master has already paid a mid-grade crystal. What else do we have to pay? 2 low-grade crystals are enough." "Yes, senior." Nuo Yeqing responded. She took out 2 low-grade crystals from her storage ring and handed them to the guard. After he finished speaking, he respectfully asked the 2 to enter. When he was outside the door, he didn't feel that there was anything noisy inside. But when Xiao Hua stepped through the door, a burst of noise surged like waves. Xiao Hua couldn't help but frown slightly. Xiao Hua released his divine sense to explore and saw that this was a palace that was dozens of acres in size. It was somewhat similar to the auction house he had seen in Jinghua City. The entire palace was divided into several areas, and each area was divided into many small sections. The items sold in the small sections of each area were different. Some were pills, some were magic tools, some were jade slips, and so on. There were quite a few cultivators in every region, some whispering, some clamoring, all of them haggling, just like the marketplace of the secular world. In the most central area, there were many cultivators gathered around a grid. These cultivators looked a little crazy and were desperately trying to squeeze to the nearest grid. They even shouted, "Senior, this is my crystal. Please give me the cultivation method. My attribute is..." Fellow Taoists, fellow Taoists. Lu Qingyu's weary voice sounded amidst the clamor, "Don't be in such a hurry. One by one, all right? I've prepared a lot of jade slips here, enough for each of you. Senior, Junior wants to bring one for junior sister. My junior sister is of the water attribute. Senior, I have 4 junior sisters. They are of the water attribute and the fire attribute respectively." "Oh." Hearing this, Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Yi Qing, when did your master copy so many jade slips?" "Shoo." Nuo Yeqing whispered, "Senior, my master is a money grubber. I'm afraid that when he heard that you were coming to the auction, he didn't stay idle all the way." "Ha ha ha." Xiao Hua laughed. He immediately remembered that when he came out of the puppet shop, Lu Qingyu was anxiously looking for the auction. It seemed that he had already prepared. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't have any intention to blame, Nuo Yeqing said again, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. Junior will go and help my master, okay?" Xiao Hua nodded and said, "This old man will go and look at other places." However, before Xiao Hua finished speaking, he frowned and said indifferently, "You don't have to go first. It seems that there's a good show to watch." "Oh." Nuo Yeqing was slightly stunned and somewhat puzzled. However, she didn't need to look far away. In a door not far from her, a dozen Golden Core Realm cultivators wearing bright armor walked out with a spirit-severing stage cultivator around them. They went straight to the crowd of cultivators. "Senior, are these people from Xiahong Mountain's Yuhong Mountain?" Nuo Yeqing was shocked and immediately understood something. She whispered, "It must be that Master and Martial Uncle's bidding for the cultivation method attracted his attention." "That's right." Xiao Hua's expression didn't change. He withdrew his gaze from other places and waved his hand. "I'll go and take a look and see what this guy plans to do." "Yes, Senior." Nuo Yeqing stole a glance at Xiao Hua. She suddenly felt that Xiao Hua was very similar to a person she was very familiar with. However, looking at Xiao Hua's back and Xiao Hua's expression of contempt for the spirit-severing stage cultivator, she shook her head with a bitter smile. Since Xiao Hua noticed the arrival of a group of Golden Core Realm cultivators, the cultivators standing around the aura refining disciples to watch the show naturally also noticed them. They hastily made way for them, and some cultivators who were familiar with Yuhong Mountain's Yuhong Mountain hurriedly greeted them. Yuhong Mountain's Yuhong Mountain's Yuhong Mountain had a smile on his face. He very elegantly nodded to the surrounding people, and from time to time, he would even raise his hand to signal. He looked very amiable and approachable. When the Golden Core Realm cultivators arrived behind the aura refining disciples, they naturally didn't berate them like the people of the secular world. They released their spiritual pressure, and those aura refining disciples immediately sensed it. Although their faces were full of displeasure, they still stopped shouting and obediently made way for the lattice. Through the gaps in the crowd, Yuehua and Lu Qingyu's somewhat tired figures appeared. Oh my, so it's the two fellow Taoists from the Chanha school. More than 10 Golden Core Realm cultivators surrounded the lattice, blocking the other cultivators outside. Yuhong Mountain walked over with a surprised expression. He cupped his hands and said, "This old man was wondering who it was. We've really neglected you." Seeing the spirit-severing stage cultivator salute them, Yuehua and Lu Qingyu were somewhat terrified. They hastily came out from the lattice and respectfully bowed. Junior greets Yuhong Mountain. Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Yuhong Mountain waved his hand and said with a smile, "This old man is very familiar with your sect head Lu. Last time, your elder Yu came to my Jingping Hall to sell some method for selecting spiritual roots. This old man just happened to not be in the auction house. I only found out after I came back. This old man was just thinking of finding a time to go to Xingyin Ridge. What a coincidence, you guys actually came first. Come, let's go to the Jingping Hall. This old man will let the disciples serve tea. You guys wait and tell this old man what's going on. Why is it so lively? This." Yuehua and Lu Qingyu were somewhat hesitant. They didn't expect that just selling some aura refining cultivation methods would attract Yuhong Mountain's attention. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, and reward. Thank you for all forms of support. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.